Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board, and this is the Select Board meeting for June 13, 2023. We're going to start off with announcements and updates, and I would like to start off with a statement regarding a letter in our packet from the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization dated June 6. The letter criticizes the Select Board's MBTA Communities Act Multifamily Permitting Committee for discussing proposals that the letter argues will not comply with the act or will not achieve goals that the Select Board set out in its charge to the committee. The letter then recommends that the committee disband because it has not been able to, quote, identify any alternatives to the Harvard Street rezoning proposal that accomplishes meaningful compliance, close quote, with the act. My guess is that this board will not ask the committee to follow the letter's recommendation, but will give its full support to the important work that the committee is performing at this very early stage. But it is important, in my opinion, to respond to this letter because the suggestion that our committee has not continuing value and should be disbanded. So, why was the committee set up? Most members of the board are not as enamored with the act as the writers of the letter appear to be. The act was written as a one-size-fits-all solution to the housing crisis in the Commonwealth. It does not prioritize affordability, which is a Brookline priority concern. It is premised on the proposition that increased density, which under a classical economics model of market behavior would cause rents to decline. But is that uniformly appropriate in all MBTA communities? It may work in certain MBTA communities, but it is not something that would work in Brookline. In Brookline, the number one rule of real estate pricing applies with a vengeance. That rule is location, location, and location. Brookline is a first-ranked suburb of Boston. It is easy to get from Brookline to almost any place in the metro region. In fact, you can conveniently get to many places by public transportation. We have the B, C, and D lines into downtown Boston. 1 block away, the C line to Northeastern. And if you have a blue bike, you're within biking distance of the Longwood Medical Area, or you could just walk there. The 66 bus from Nubian Square, where the Ben Franklin Institute will be relocating, will take you to Harvard Square. And the 65 bus will take you to Alston, where Harvard is building more educational facilities. In addition to Harvard and Northeastern, BU is on our border. BC is just down the street. Suffolk is reachable by any of the T trains, and MIT is just a hop, skip, and a transfer to the Red Line away. Many people in high-paying jobs in medicine, academia, computers, etc., want to live close to their jobs and are demanding housing in Brookline and are willing and able to pay top dollar. Building more housing will mean luxury condominiums and apartments for those people, not in any significant way affordable housing. Our inclusive zoning, which the act in fact limits, may help with some affordable housing, but developers will increase their market-based rents to make up for the losses on affordable units, resulting in higher rents and home costs in the surrounding areas, thereby making Brookline less affordable and pushing it towards being a town for the rich and with some poor families, but no working class or middle class to balance it out, or a reduction in those classes. That would not be sustainable, and it would negatively impact, especially those families on the lower end of the income spectrum. The committee was established to find options that would avoid some of these and other perils of the act. That is, finding ways to address affordability, commercial growth, and other concerns somewhat unique to Brookline, while at the same time complying with the act and with a bylaw that will pass town meeting. The committee is just one prong of an intentional strategy by the select board that includes working with our state representative, Tommy Vitolo, on legislation, collaboration with other similarly situated communities, and outreach to the Department of Housing and Community Development, now the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, to urge them to make appropriate revisions to their guidelines so that they have the flexibility to be appropriate to the variety of municipalities that are MBTA communities, all of which have their unique issues. In my opinion, the committee must continue to do its important work. So other select board members should give their opinions if they disagree or have more to say. And I don't know who was first. I'll
Miriam,
call
go ahead.
Miriam first.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's the end of my statement. Thank you.
So I appreciate that you very clearly stating that that is your opinion, because it is certainly not my opinion. I was happy to read that letter. While I don't necessarily think that the select board committee should be disbanded, I do think that they should look at their charge and can be compliant with their charge, which is to find compliant alternatives and not paper alternatives. So I respectfully disagree with your statement. And I want to be very clear that speaking for myself, I'm very much in support of what that letter had to say. And I hope the committee does what it is we have actually asked them to do.
It's early in the process. Mike?
Well, so I agree with entirely with what Miriam said. I will say I also agree with your sentiment that you're concerned that a solution needs to encourage middle class housing. That's something that that clearly is the major issue that's missing in what's been developed in Brookline in the last 20 years, really. The committee was formed because people who looked at the MBTA Communities Act challenged it and said that not only did they challenge the act, but they also challenged the planning department and the planning department's request to study Harvard Street as a possible solution to complying with the MBTA Communities Act. And the committee was challenged to come up with alternatives that would work, alternatives to the Harvard Street plan that would work, including the possibility of taking chunks of Harvard Street into consideration for an MBTA compliant zone. And they seem to have wandered away from that. And I agree that it's early, but I also think that because it's early, it's a good time to remind them what we're looking for from them.
Okay, thank you.
And I would like just to
Paul?
add briefly to my colleagues' comments.
and perhaps its name. DHCD, perhaps under its new title, might be prone to change the guidelines. And if DHCD were to change the guidelines, we might find that the work that the committee is doing is exactly on target. So I think we're all, I hope, agreed that we're in a situation right now that could change prior to November's town meeting. And I think the flexibility of the committee that was appointed in looking at solutions that might turn out to be the most workable solutions and the most productive solutions, not just in the minds of town meeting members, but in the minds of what was once known as DHCD, is probably a good path to be on. So I've spoken to members of the select board's committee about this, and I've told them, they still have my support. I'm not going to ask them to, abandon some of their work. I think that the work they've done so far is good, and it could turn out to be just the work we need by the time that town meeting rolls around. So I'm happy to support them. I do want to say too, though, GBIO is a very good organization, and they're doing good work, and they're doing very good work on the state level having to do with public housing units. And I think, their input is welcome. And I have no problem with them having sent us this letter expressing their view on these issues. I just happen to disagree with them on the particularities of the letter that they sent us.
Yes.
I'd just like to clarify, Mike and I never said at any point we wanted the committee to disband.
Oh, are they?
What we want them to do is do what's in their charge. And that's what we're asking for. And right now, that's not what they've done. So,
No, we have time.
and we do have time, which is exactly what I think all of us are saying, which is now is the time for the course correction.
Yeah, and I wasn't intending to denigrate the letter, just to make sure that the committee knew that, at least in my opinion, they have our support. Any other updates or comments? John?
Just a quick note. I always feel like as the oldest, perhaps, or near oldest member of the board, I have an obligation.
You're older than me, John.
To cite,
okay?
to cite.
I think Mike.
I know.
Oh,
I think I
okay.
take the prize here,
I love they were fighting for this title. I happily concede it.
Yeah.
It's all yours. But I often feel an obligation to cite something of historical interest. And we have a holiday coming up, and we're gonna acknowledge and say a few words about Juneteenth in a couple of minutes. But there's also a holiday tomorrow. It's known as Flag Day. It used to be celebrated in Brookline not too long ago with great fanfare. It became our chosen holiday after attendance at and the capability of large numbers of people to join in a Memorial Day parade dwindled. And so it was decided maybe we're not going to have the old-fashioned Memorial Day parade that we used to have, but we can do something the Second Continental Congress, and the resolution stated, real quick, resolved that the flag of the 13 United States be 13 stripes, alternate red and white, that the Union be 13 stars, white in a blue field representing a new constellation. So tomorrow's Flag Day. I know that there are some people in Brookline who still love to put out flags on Flag Day.
Great. Any other Updates, announcements, or?
I do have one thing. It's very much something that I think that it's not a matter of for the public to be concerned about particularly, but I do think the public should know that I'm going to be inviting you all for dinner with your significant others. Ideally, either July 10th or July 12th as a sort of a precursor to a social precursor, not a business precursor to having a couple of offsites that we've been talking about with Paul and I have been talking about with Chaz. So check your calendars and
Save the date.
hopefully you'll all come with your significant others.
Or alone.
Or not- or not.
And you've checked open meeting law on this, right?
We just can't talk about it.
Just can't talk about
We
it.
just can't, we can't talk business.
And the-
That's why significant others are being invited to prevent us from talking about it. I know my wife will say, you can't do that. You can't talk
Okay.
about that.
Okay. Okay, anything else? So one of our items on the miscellaneous, I'm sorry, yes?
Public comment? Did you want to?
I was thinking of doing the proclamation during, this session.
Okay.
Just to get it out of the way. Okay, so one of the items on our miscellaneous agenda is a proclamation regarding Juneteenth, which is coming up on Monday. And we actually have two celebrations in Brookline on Sunday evening and Monday. So I'd like to read that now so that when we get to miscellaneous, we can just approve it along with everything else. And it reads, whereas the United States of America is made up of a multicolored and diverse melange of people who themselves or through their ancestors are immigrants, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, from every corner of the globe, or whose ancestors were indigenous to the land forming the United States. And whereas the United States was conceived on July 4, 1776, with the Declaration of Independence, in which the signers declared that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And whereas from the beginning of the nation, these words have been construed to allow the enslavement of human beings. And whereas the tension between states and individuals seeking the continuance of the slave system and those seeking emancipation of enslaved people resulted in a bloody civil war beginning on April 12, 1861, when Confederate forces attacked the Union-controlled Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. And whereas at 2 p.m. on New Year's Day, January 1st, 1868, using his war powers as president, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, providing that all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state shall be thenceforward and forever free. And whereas the Civil War continued after the Emancipation Proclamation, with over 600,000 casualties in total until April 9, 1865, when Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. And whereas on June 19, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, and announced the end of both the Civil War and the end of slavery, declaring that the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. And whereas Texas began the celebration of Juneteenth in 1866, and on January 1st, 1980, Juneteenth became an official Texas state holiday. And since the Texas holiday was established, 48 other states and the District of Columbia have also declared it an official holiday. And whereas the Commonwealth of Massachusetts declared Juneteenth Independence Day on June 19, 2020, now therefore, we, the Brookline Select Board, do hereby proclaim June 19, 2022 as Juneteenth in Brookline, to be celebrated on Sunday, June 18, with a block party at the Florida Ruffin Ridley School with food, games, and other activities, and on Monday, June 19, with a Freedom March starting at the Florida Ruffin Ridley School and ending at a Juneteenth celebration at the Brookline Avenue Playground. So I read the whole thing because I think it's important for us to read the proclamations that we vote and sign because of the historical information in them, and just so people know, what the town and the select board is thinking about these celebrations. So, any other? Yeah.
Just quickly, I don't know if I just failed to hear you mention it, but the Sunday celebration starts at noon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Let's move on to public comment. John, do you want to
I
set
would
the stage?
happily do the honors. This is our opportunity to hear your perspective on issues in Brookline that matter to you. There are a few rules. Each person speaking tonight is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. We encourage you to refrain from personal attacks and from addressing personnel issues during your comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer. We're more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and to respond over email. We will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time is up. So please conclude your remarks at that time. And if you have more to say, you're welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. Devin, who's on our list?
The first person signed up for public comment is Amy Newell. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you. Thank you, Select Board. Amy Newell, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7, speaking about the Office of Housing Stability that Town Meeting just passed. I didn't have the opportunity to speak at Town Meeting to make it clear how urgently we need this office. Even just one person with a phone number and an email address that can be given out would be incredibly helpful immediately. How do I know? Well, I'll be honest, when I first heard about creating an Office of Housing Stability, I thought, yeah, that sounds great. Boston has one. We should too. But I didn't have a really visceral understanding of that need. Then a few weeks ago, one of my best friends, a Precinct 10 resident, was home in the early afternoon with her 2 Pierce-aged children, one of whom had strep throat, her 8-month-old baby, and don't get me started on what a terrible, difficult pregnancy that was for her, and her dog. Suddenly, she realized that there seemed to be a fire in her bathroom ceiling. I'm still texting asking her if she's been able to fill the antibiotics prescription for her kid, but she's now texting me about standing on the street with 3 kids and her dog while the fire department shuts down the street and drags a lot of hoses into her building. 3 hours later, when the fire department let her back in for a few moments, she found that several rooms in her home were now open to the sky. My friend grew up in Brookline and has lived here for as long as I've known her, but like many longtime Brookline residents, she hasn't been able to buy, so she's a renter. She didn't know what to do. Would her landlord break her lease and take the opportunity to renovate? What did her lease even say? What might renter's insurance cover? Could she afford to get another place in Brookline if she had to, in her kid's school district? How long would she need alternate housing for? And what was she going to do right now with 3 kids and a dog? She was overwhelmed. Luckily, I thought, I bet the folks working on this warrant article know something about exactly the situation. And they did. I was able to get her some advice. It turned out that her landlord and her renter's insurance were helpful, and she was able to find some temporary housing. So she got lucky. But nobody should have to have a friend who knows a guy to get help when they're standing in the ruins of their home. If Brookline had an Office of Housing Stability, just one person even who could explain what needed to happen, hook a person up with all the nonprofit assistance available, help them understand that lease, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be great if when the firefighters let you back in to look at the damage, they handed you a card and the card had a phone number and you just called that number and someone helped? We can do that for everyone in Brookline. We can get that card into the hands of the people who need it in the moment they need it
You have
most.
30 seconds.
We shouldn't put it on hold. We can and should do something now to help folks immediately and then build out more resources as needed over time. Thank you.
The next person signed up for comment is Chi Chi Wu. You've been promoted to a panelist. Your 3 minutes will begin when you're ready.
Good evening, Chi Chi Wu, Town Meeting Member Precinct 7, and the co-petitioner on the warrant article for an Office of Housing Stability. And you might be wondering, why are we talking about this? The warrant article passed, right? Well, now comes the hard part, getting this actually done, getting it funded, getting it created and stood up. During the debates on warrant article 13, the town administrator mentioned that going through a consultant process and putting together a comprehensive plan for social services, 12 to 18 months. Totally respect that. This is your process. You should go through it. But in the meantime, what we want to urge is that there be stopgap measures for that 12 to 18 months, because the need is immediate and it's right now. And stories like Amy's emphasize that. And that's why we wanted to bring them for you. Right now, there are renters who need help. And so, even just putting together some resources, getting a part-time person from another department willing to fill that in as a stopgap would be great. For the rest of the time I'm going to read another statement that didn't get a chance to be read, or as much of it as I can. And that's the statement of Kimberly Richardson, who's a town meeting member in Precinct 2. And when she talks about the warrant article, just substitute getting the Office of Housing Stability created. So as a social worker, I see youth become unhoused often. A young person comes out to their parents and they're told they can no longer live at home. Youth are neglected and abused, so they leave home sleeping from couch to couch. I'm on the board of the Brookline Community Development Corporation, and people reach out to us for support with their housing challenges. We all deserve a roof over our head. Brookline has an opportunity to ensure that vulnerable members of our community who are at risk of becoming unhoused have a place to go. There's a better way, and it's voting favorable action to create an Office of Housing Stability. Being homeless is something none of us would like to experience. That feeling of hopelessness and shame are feelings that cannot be described, especially when you look at your children and realize you may not have anywhere to go. I've been in that situation twice. In 1998, my landlord was selling their property and the buyers wanted the property vacant. In 2012, my landlord's son was getting married and moving into the house. My children and I were left with nowhere to go. I eventually got lucky. My name rose to the top of the wait list for the Brookline Housing Authority. The day I received my key, I was so excited, but the apartment was not ready for anyone to move into. That fear of homelessness was still heavy on my mind, so I signed a lease to live in an apartment with absolutely horrible conditions. That was the beginning of the promises. I was told all the conditions I'd pointed out would be fixed, but things were never fixed.
You have
The
30
fear-
seconds.
The fear of homelessness silenced me. One day I found the courage to call the Brookline Health Department. They came, looked at the property, and during the walkthrough, the director of maintenance began to question me about things, about why I had a washing machine that made me feel like maybe calling the health department was a mistake. The health department made their recommendations and sent out a notice to get work done by a certain time. I was later retaliated again in the form of billing repairs for the repair of my stove. Because of this, I dropped my case. Tenants should not fear their landlord. The Office of Housing Stability is a voice for tenants who are afraid that they'll be evicted or their lease won't be renewed. Thank you.
I see someone in the attendee list with their hand raised. Hold on one second. Alec, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you, Devin. Alec Lebovitz, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. Just wanted to briefly offer my support for the comments we heard tonight from my colleagues from Precinct 7 and Precinct 2. I think as we saw at town meeting with a near unanimous vote, this is one of our town meeting's top priorities for this year. And I appreciate in advance your attention and your urgency on making sure we follow through with implementation here. I did want to offer one thought in addition to what we'd already heard, which is we do have an opportunity presented to us this year for the first time for a recurring funding source that can, and in fact, part needs to be addressed towards community housing priorities, including rent stabilization and housing security. And that is the Community Preservation Act funding process, which is underway. I had the opportunity to attend the community charrette last week, as well as take the survey put out by the CPA committee. which has done an excellent job at engaging the community on priorities, and can tell you that funding for the Office of Housing Stability has been raised both to and by the committee. I would encourage the select board and potentially the town administrator to consider the appropriate town department to put forth a request to the committee for funding to support the work of such an office. This fall, I believe they'll be taking applications. So just wanted to offer that suggestion to the select board, and thank you again in advance for your attention to this matter. Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is Carlos Rios. You promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
We
Thank you,
can.
Devin. Thank you, Devin. My name is Carlos Rios. I am a town meeting member here in Precinct 5. And I'm very grateful that my peers voted almost unanimously in favor of this warrant article. I do want to share that I have been a resident of High Street Bets for over 20 years and a renter for 5 years. It has been an absolute blessing living here in public housing, namely due to the fact that if I lost my job tomorrow, I wouldn't be homeless. However, in the last 2 decades of living here, I have not seen much change in regard to the development's infrastructure. These buildings were constructed in 1947, and the lack of modern HVAC system, proper ventilation, and dealing with old radiators are felt daily. My mother and I have very bad asthma, yet when loved ones without asthma come over, they feel the effects of being in my space. They describe it as being stuffy, and they struggle to breathe as well. As a renter, I wasn't sure there was much I could do. I know the building's maintenance is tied to the annual state funding, which is constantly underfunded year after year. I know the BHA folks work hard with what they got, but it's still hard to breathe. But I recently attended a Brookline Equity Coalition sponsored workshop called Tenant Talks, where I learned about the state sanitary code, my ability to request inspection, the resources afforded to me, and my right as a tenant to request reasonable accommodations and reasonable modifications. I didn't know I had all of these options as a tenant prior to the workshop. Neither did the elders and fellow renters that came. These things aren't exactly common knowledge. While I haven't decided to take action yet, I know at least I deserve and can demand a home that I can breathe in. And while I learned a lot, I know there's more I can learn. I wish I had a place to turn to so I can learn these things. It's for this reason that I'm very grateful that this office is a possibility. And I'm encouraging that the select board figures it out in a professional way and in partnership with the town meeting members. And thank you to everyone who heard my story. Have a good evening.
The next person signed up for public comment is Bonnie Bastian. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Bonnie Bastian, town meeting member, Precinct 5. My comments are following up on the passing of warrant Article 13 at town meeting. I've been a renter in Brookline for over 20 years, and I'm also in the cost burden category, but my situation is far from the worst. Last summer, my rent was raised by $800 a month. My husband, my daughter, and I live with temporary renters to be able to afford to stay in our home. We've struggled to get my landlord to make critical repairs for the 11 years that we have lived in our current house. These repairs are to conditions that directly affect my family's health. Here are some examples of those issues that we're dealing with. Many of the windows in my home are rotted out because there are no gutters on the back of the house. A few years into my tenancy, I found that I could stick my finger straight through one of the rotted window casings to the outside. My bed is up against one of these windows, and when lying in bed on a rainy night, I can hear and feel water leaking into the window casing, which pools up and soaks into the sill. Sometimes at night, as we lay there, we can hear bugs chewing on the wood for hours. We lay in bed listening to the sound of our home disintegrating. And this past April, that window's storm window fell off into my backyard and remains there. Another example, our furnace was finicky from the day we moved in, and eventually we just learned to rig a solution when the furnace water heater pressure was too low to pump hot water up into the radiators or for showers. It happened every 6 months, then every month, and then every week until finally it broke after 10 years this past November. I had to demand my landlord send a repair person to the house within 24 hours because he wanted us to wait a week. At the time, my daughter had a virus and we weren't able to properly shower, wash dishes, or our hands. And the next day, the company came to assess the heater. When this person was done, he told me that while he is only supposed to speak with the owner of the house on his findings, he thought I should know that it's very likely that the furnace had been leaking carbon monoxide into my house for some time because of multiple holes in the exhaust pipe. And in this case, my crumbling windows that let the wind through may have saved my family's life. How completely absurd. 11 years of this has caused my partner and I an enormous amount of stress and anxiety that leaks into all aspects of our life. What I needed was advice and information to help me understand what my rights are in the
You have
context
30
of
seconds.
my very specific rental arrangement, so I could advocate for repairs without pushing the landlord to give up and sell the house. We're lucky enough to have a friend that is well versed in tenant rights law that could share some thoughts. Our problems are not at all solved, but I do have a better understanding of my rights now and have been able to use that information to develop my own strategies to leverage them. The Office of Housing Stability needs to be robust and not reliant on a set of volunteers, as I've heard mention of. I hope that Town Administrator Carey is able to begin the work to build substantial and effective Office of Housing Stability as soon as possible because the
You've
need
reached
is
3
critical.
minutes.
Thank you so much.
At this time, there are 9 virtual attendees and 3 in person. No one is using the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Thank you. Town Administrator Carey, can I ask you to, I mean to put you on the spot. I mean, there's some of the speakers are talking about 12 to 18 months before we are up and running with our Housing Stability Office. But my understanding of what you said was that to get fully in shape is going to take that much time. We have we have resources currently that people can use to deal with some of the issues that they face. And there are resources that people can be referred to deal with other issues. And as I understand, both in the Select Board's office as well as the Planning Office and elsewhere, there are those resources and information. It's just a question of us pulling that together. And my hope is that we're doing that, pulling that together to address the immediate problem while we work on the long-term solution.
Yes, that's what we're doing. Now that this warrant article has passed, we're working diligently per your instructions, members of the Select Board, to effectuate the will of town meeting on this. So my team, department heads, we have an all hands meeting shortly, and we're going to sit and talk through not just the longer term operation of this. It's been a long couple of weeks, but the what we're doing in the short term. What are the immediate issues? What are the immediate sort of resources we have available, and how can we highlight them better to the community so that people have an awareness?
Paul?
Just as a follow-on to that, I mean, you do hear the sense of urgency from the community, and there are a lot of disparate resources that seem like there are answers there. I think in the near term, it would be very helpful to have a name and a phone number and an email address for the housing stability that someone can just contact. And even if that person isn't perfectly well-versed in all of the nuances of how to deal with and triage issues, I think being able to start to understand the type of requests and concerns that are being raised would be really helpful. And, perhaps some of those would be able to be dealt with right away, and some may need more complex interactions. But I think having that point of contact would be a good start.
Mike?
There's a really, I think there's an example within town government that you may want to talk to Bill McGrady about how he single-handedly by and large serves as the switch point, as it were, point of reference for veterans looking for help. And he does it on a very slim budget. And from all accounts, does an extremely good job. So it's possible. And as long as it's, understood what that the person is a source of referrals, as opposed to having to actually do the work some of that work needs to be done by building inspector or a health department. Some of it needs to be done elsewhere, perhaps by state agencies.
Yeah. Okay, anything else? Okay, moving on to miscellaneous items. First, question of approving the meeting minutes from May 31st, 2023 and June 6th, 2023. If people had an opportunity to review those and are you ready to approve them? Okay, I move approval of the meeting minutes of May 31st and June 6th, 2023. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Let's see who's first. John.
Aye.
Miriam.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Paul.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. As you'll see later on, we have had a discussion about the formality of our meetings, and I'm going back to referring to people by their first names because a lot of people want to do that. Any rate, moving on. Question. Okay, we have about looks like 15 miscellaneous items. I'm going to read them quickly. I assume people have already reviewed them. But for the record, question of approving proclamation recognizing Juneteenth, question of approving authorization to hire request in the police department for a violence prevention advocate, question of approving the authorization to hire request in the police department for the following position, social services manager, question of approving authorization to hire request from the planning director for a preservation planner, question of approving the authorization to hire request from the recreation director for a lead teacher early education center, question of approving the authorization to hire request for a position in the parks and open space division of DPW for an athletic field supervisor, question of accepting a grant from the Brookline Community Foundation to support the Brookline Recreation Summer Camp in the amount of $8,000. Let's see. Question of accepting $32,000 in racial equity grant funds from the Brookline Community Foundation to support the Brookline Asian American Family Network and Brookline Public Schools programs. Question of approving the appropriation transfer request within the Public Buildings Department budget in the amount of $5,000 from code enforcement personnel to town hall electricity. Question of approving the appropriation transfer request within the police department budget in the amount of $61,843 from administration training to patrol public safety equipment and patrol public safety supplies. Question of approving the appropriation transfer request within the fire department budget in the amount of $3,000 from maintenance supplies to tuition reimbursements. Question of approving a contract for Skyline Park improvements with Geosurfaces for synthetic turf replacement in the amount of $400,305. Question of approving an appropriation transfer request from Town Council's office from legal general consulting and claims of $85,600 to legal claims and settlements. Question of approving, and finally, item 3O, question of approving the following alternate manager for New England Treatment Access, Benjamin Brouillard. Okay, any questions about those? Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay, now calendar, boards and commission interviews. And we have a candidate for the planning board. It's Matthew Hyatt, and he's here in the audience. So please introduce yourself and why you're interested in being a member of the planning board.
Will do. I'm Matthew Hyatt. I'm a town meeting member precinct 4. Saw all of you last week, so thank you for your continued late nights. I am an architect, commercial architect, been practicing for 29 years. I've lived in Brookline for 27, and I think I'm answering a call. Heather Hamilton reached out to me at the end of last year to say that there was an opening on the planning board and had not been filled. And there were, as far as she was aware, some people who had suggested I might be interested in the position. One of my employees, Shelley, just left her position on the planning board. I spoke with her. With 2 people down, I thought this is the time. So Polly reached out. I've talked to a couple other folks who have been on the planning board and think I can probably help. I am primarily focused on commercial work. I don't do residential single family. So the kinds of things that the planning board deals with, I've actually been on the other side as an architect in a lot of Metro West towns applying for permission to build things for my clients. Actually been in some spaces in Long Island as well. So I know the other side and know what it's like to be in front of a planning board. And I've been following with great enthusiasm John's Boylston Street Corridor Study Committee since its inception during the pandemic. That was a great introduction to me in terms of seeing how things are happening in terms of boards and commissions and study groups that could affect the town for the better. And so I thought, I ultimately, I also worked on the what do we call the 10 Brookline Place Committee, on the architectural subcommittee of that. So I had a little taste of that as well. I figured this is a great time to raise my hand, say, yes, I think I have a set of skills and experiences that could benefit the town. I certainly have time. My kids are now grown and one's in college and one has moved on. My position on the Cannabis Mitigation Advisory Committee is up in August, so that moves away. I'm involved in a number of other things outside of this, but I feel like I have the time to commit to it. And I know it's a 5-year commitment and fairly labor intensive, but ask busy people to do things and they'll probably say yes. And I think that's what I'm doing. I'm saying yes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
Well,
Miriam.
actually, hi, Matthew.
Hi.
So my first question actually for Devin. Devin, usually there's something in here about how many vacancies there are. And so what's the situation?
There are 2 vacancies and there is also one member's term who is expired.
And do we know if they're going to reapply or?
They interviewed before you many months ago.
Oh, okay.
But
The answer is yes.
the board, wasn't.
We still haven't.
Yes.
Okay, so 2 vacancies and how many applicants? Because we interviewed other people also.
Yes. So you've interviewed one other person.
Okay, thank you. So I do have a question for you. Thank you. I just wanted to get that in my mind. So I'm fascinated because when reading your resume or CV, I always get confused. You have a lot in here, okay, about dining. And I actually went to Mount Holyoke. So I know what they did with Blanchard.
Yes.
So I just would love, I know it's a little bit off topic, but how does that fold into your work as an architecture? You have all this sustainable dining.
Yeah. So I'm in my sort of 3rd generation. So for the last 12 years, I've been focused on higher ed. So working with colleges, universities. My particular, we call it our secret superpower. My particular one is consensus building. So I work a lot with administrators, mostly students, to understand what's happening culturally on a campus and trying to figure out how the work that we're doing can help to reinforce the sense of place or the sense of belonging, which is a huge issue right now, through the design, the careful design, and also very inclusive processes. So making sure that we have formats where people are invited and encouraged to participate, even if they're not designers. That's the hardest thing for people, to feel like there's a low enough bar to enter a conversation about design. So I tend to focus on trying to make the design conversations understandable, accessible, mostly to students who, for a lot of them, they can't read floor plans. But the conversation has to be what the space feels like, what the space does for you, how you'll be using the facilities once they're done. And that's sort of the focus. But I think I'm pretty good at interpreting things that are legal or code related for the layperson to help them understand the intent or the reason for. And so that's sort of one of the things I think might be applicable. The middle part of my 30 years was focused on restaurants and banks. So I permitted a lot of banks. And as you know,
I have
banks.
a lot
were-
of those in Brookline. too.
Banks 10, 12, well, 12, 15 years ago, banks were really like the thing that was taking all the corner spots.
Yeah.
And so that was my job, was to get their projects approved. So I also feel like I understand not the tricks, but the techniques that applicants use to kind of interpret zoning codes
Mm.
for the benefit of their clients. So I sort of have some sense for how those things might appear in a presentation, enough to be able to work with them. I appreciate that that's what the design teams are hired to do, but I also recognize that sometimes it's stretching the intent of the code, and that part of it is to push back.
Well, I've clearly partaken in something you were involved in designing.
Have you been back?
Of course, yeah, reunion.
Yeah, I love that the students after we all left named it Super Blanche. That was not the name of the project, but
No,
because
Super
Blanchard's
Blanche.
Hall
Yeah.
is enlarged Super Blanche. So
For you,
Hmm.
for the rest of you unknowing people, they took dining, which was in every single dorm, and they created one large dining space, which pretty much has everything you could ever think
Oh, yeah.
someone would ever want to eat.
Yeah, schools are doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Eight
Yeah.
dining rooms, each with its own character, represented of the 8 dining halls that used to be in the dorms that were consolidated.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fascinating. It's really well done. I've-
Yeah, UMass did something
Yeah.
on a massive scale in Amherst. They have a.
And there was a lot of culture
Yeah.
to navigate, which, so I really appreciate that. There's a lot of culture about each dining experience in each dining hall, and yeah.
I've been able to speak a bit about the approvals process when it's sort of culturally a hot button, particularly for alumni
Yeah.
who think of it as, this is how it was when
This
I
is
was
how-
there.
yes,
And if you
right.
go now, it's not like that anymore. So-
Yeah.
Oh,
But those are the people who fund the projects.
Okay, Paul?
Sure, thanks. Matt, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked the last candidates. First, thank you for your service to our community already. Sounds like you're very well plugged in. So as you know, we have a lot of planning going on. We've got the MBTA corridor study being done, the alternate plans. We got a broader comprehensive planning process that's going to be beginning soon. I'm curious about your thoughts of how the planning board would intersect with or even help complement the planning work that's underway. When you attend a planning board meeting, they're very focused on that square of land
Mhm.
and what is being proposed. And often the discussions don't go beyond that, and how that particular development opportunity may fit into a broader plan.
Sure.
And I'm curious about, as an architect, maybe you've experienced this with other communities, and how have other communities dealt with this issue when you're going before the planning boards?
Yeah, it's a little different in Brookline. I think we don't have what I'm used to seeing to the design guidelines, sort of set a tone for a corridor or an area or a part of the town. We don't have that, which is, I think, why a lot of stuff is handled one-off. I appreciate, I've been part of Maria Morelli's what do they call them? The workshops, which have been fascinating, well-run with the consultant team. So I appreciate the fact that we're trying as a town to create a vision for what particularly Harvard Street corridor might be in terms of the form-based zoning. So I think having some of those kinds of visions that will allow the planning board to have that bigger perspective would be very helpful. Also for the developers to come in with a proposal that sort of meets that intent from day one, and then we can help with, any of the more small scale design decisions or things related to the actual case in front of us. But I think to your original question, we don't really have that, which is the one thing I'm really interested in joining now. I think for the next 5 years, which is the length of the term, there's going to be a tremendous amount of change in what our zoning code looks like and the kinds of tools the planning board has to help implement that. I just hope the market turns around enough that we have developers actually taking advantage of the changes and we start to see some of those things brought in as actual projects.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. So we will, I promise, appoint people to the planning board soon. But until then, thank you for your interview here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great night, everybody.
Next, human resources policies, discussion and possible vote on the proposed human resources policies related to alcohol and drug testing and paid parental leave. Do we have Ann Braga here?
Remotely, yes.
So Ann, talk to us about these policies and separate out the drug and alcohol from the paid parental leave, because I think they will have different, conversations.
Ann, can you hear us? Oh, no, we can't hear you. Might be a microphone issue.
Microphone or volume, sometimes the volume is turned down.
Is she downstairs? No.
Let's see, is she?
Export.
Can you go back to her?
I think
Oh, let's
that she
see.
was hooked up to headphones and now she's disabling them.
Oh, yeah, sometimes that is the problem. Scrolls too far.
Well, we could go on to our public hearing, which is at 7 o'clock.
Right.
Be the first time we ever started a public
Wow.
hearing on time.
Yeah. And then come
Yeah,
back.
nicely done.
Yeah, let's
Good
do that. We have people here.
Okay,
Yeah.
and we'll come back to you. Sorry, we'll move through this.
All right, let me get our presentation folks up here. All right,
Good
Erin.
evening.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Oh, thanks. Great. Good evening. My name is Erin Chuk Galentine. I'm the Commissioner of Public Works in Brookline. I am here this evening with Brookline's Water and Sewer Director, Professional Engineer Jay Hersey, and David Fox, our financial analyst and utility consultant from Raftellus. David is an expert in water, stormwater, and sewer utilities. And over the past years, several years, he's worked with the town to create a financial management plan and rate structure for the water and sewer enterprise, understand and recover from the significant impacts of COVID that we discussed last year, and discuss best practices as it relates to the overall volatility of water consumption in the industry, and most critically, what the town should strive for regarding the reserve fund that had been depleted to help cover costs and impacts largely due to the pandemic. So today we are going to present the proposed water and sewer rate increase of 4.5% for FY24 for the board's consideration and vote. I'll note that we received an inquiry regarding the senior water and sewer exemption and consideration for enhancing that program. We've reviewed this request with town council. Amendments to the senior exemption will require a home rule petition to authorize the board. If a warrant article is submitted and passed by town meeting in the fall, it would then be submitted to the legislature for their approval. So if the board recommends this approach, I'd suggest a parallel track where we evaluate the program in various models as part of our rate structure analysis that we are already planning to undertake in the coming year. And I bring this up now as it relates to our overall recommendations for FY24, as we do not want to change or eliminate the current program. So back to our rates at a high level, and for those watching at home, the Brookline Department of Public Works makes a recommendation each year to the select board at a public hearing for the proposed water and sewer rates for the upcoming fiscal year. This hearing is held in June because the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, or MWRA, rates and percentage increases for the upcoming year are generally finalized in late spring. The Water and Sewer Director reviews the MWRA assessment along with the town's operating expenses and capital projects required to protect, maintain, and operate the infrastructure. We develop a proposed balanced budget to meet the water and sewer. We meet with the water and sewer rates task force and then advertise the hearing 1 month ahead of the meeting date. The meeting notice with the proposed rate increase of 4.5% was advertised in the Boston Herald on May 9th. And we posted the memo reads and presentation on the town's news alerts. This was the town's homepage, DPW page, water and sewer page as well, 2 weeks prior to this meeting. The Citizen Water and Sewer Rates Task Force was created in 2019 to develop a new rate structure to promote revenue sufficiency, stability, conservation, and affordability. The task force met twice this spring to discuss the enterprise, the proposed rate increase, the findings, and draft presentation prepared by Ralph Tellis. I'd like to thank the Citizen Committee for their continued review and input. And this includes Dick Benka, David LeCollier, Ernie Fry, Linda Olson-Pelkey, and Tom Elwertowski. The task force unanimously supports the proposed rate increase of 4.5%. So with this, I'll now introduce our Water and Sewer Director, who will commence the presentation and recommendation for FY24 rates. And following the presentation, we are glad to entertain any questions that you may have. Thank you, and I turn it over to Ray. Jay, and I know that we will want to share the screen as well.
Yeah, good evening. Jay Hersey, Director of Water and Sewer. Can everybody see the screen?
Yep.
Excellent.
Yes.
So yeah, I'll be kicking off the presentation with a few slides, and then after that, I'll hand it off to Dave Fox with Ralph Tellis to go over the proposed rate increase. But before we get started, I'd also like to say, special thanks to all the town staff, the rates task force members, and Ralph Tellis for all their help in reviewing, discussing, and preparing the rates this year. So with that, we'll get going. Here's our recommended budget, which has been through advisory committee, select board, and town meeting. It's a $32.5 million budget for the year, and it's it's a 3.71% increase over last year. And here's another slide that shows our budget. It's actually a budget breakdown. And if you notice the FY24 budget, the largest component is actually our MWRA assessment. And the rest of it is, personnel, supplies, debt service, and everything else. And our estimated revenues need to cover the cost of those expenditures. And the breakdown for that is on the right. But primarily, the water sewer charges making up the biggest part of it for the 32.5 million. We have 3 capital improvement projects that are there, stormwater improvements, 600,000. That's to help us adjust and deal with climate change. We use a consultant to help us with compliance for our NIPD's MS4 permit program, and also we use that to install and implement best management practices on town properties and projects. The water system improvements for this year are going to be for some meter installations, but primarily it's going to be for lead service line replacements, with the goal of trying to get all the known public and private lead inventoried in out of the system within the next 5 years per the DEP goal. And on the wastewater system front, that's $3 million. This is our I&I program where we line and seal the sewers and the manholes to try and keep the clear water out. And by keeping the clear water out, that keeps our costs down going to the treatment plant. And it's a very good program. Here's consumption trends. And if you notice here, you look at Brookline on the bottom versus the MWRA Metro system on the top, which is the 61 communities that are part of that system. You see, we pretty much follow the same trends. But if you notice in calendar year 2021, in the red being lower, that was our drought year that we had. And then in blue, calendar year 2022, that was a year where we actually had a drought. So consumption was up. So you can see right here the variability that can be seen in the course of just a couple years. And we're seeing much more of this nowadays, probably from climate change. But what this leads me into is going to be some stuff for Dave to talk about, which this variability can be difficult and for us trying to predict and estimate revenue. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave.
Thank you, Jay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dave Fox. I'm a vice president with Raftellus. Raftellus is the largest firm in the country, predominantly focused on, as Aaron mentioned, water, sewer, and stormwater financial planning and rate-related issues. It's what I spent my entire career on, and I've been working with the town for the last, I think, about 5 or 6 years now. In recent years, just the last year or two, focusing predominantly on the financial planning side of things and ensuring the financial viability of the water and the sewer funds. I presented a similar presentation last year at this meeting right around the same time. And I'm just going to kick off quickly with just an overview of a rate or financial planning study. The purpose is to obviously ensure the long-term sustainability of the town's water and sewer funds. I think everybody in this meeting or on this call can agree how important water and sewer services, especially the water side. We can't live without that, and maintaining that integrity of both the system, the infrastructure, as well as the financial integrity of the systems, are integral to being able for the town to provide good, clean, safe water and sewer service to all the residents 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We want to make sure that we have enough revenue every single year to be able to support the infrastructure needs and keeping up with operating expenses such that we can do just that. Excuse me. In doing so, we also analyze what the impacts are to customers, which we'll get into in a little bit later. Just a few anecdotes just to kind of set the stage for the conversation when we get to rate increases, although Aaron already alluded to that with a 4.5% rate increase, which is our recommendation, which is in line with where we thought we were going to be, right around there. This time last year. But across the country, water rates have been increasing by about 5% every single year for the last almost 2 decades ago. Obviously, communities go up in, at different paces, but on average, they've been going up at about 5% every single year. So that 4.5% is below that. And sewer rates have been going up by about 6% a year every single year for the last 2 decades or so. And again, above that 4.5%, which we're recommending this evening. The primary drivers of the need for these rate increases are just inflationary impacts. They're not just hitting us in our wallets at home. They're hitting water and sewer funds as well. And just, everything's becoming more expensive, unfortunately. Also, the, aging infrastructure, the need to renew and replace that again to maintain the integrity of the system. And if that wasn't an uphill battle enough, we've also been facing, and Brookline is no different here, declines in per capita consumption, predominantly due to just installation of high efficiency fixtures, low flow toilets, low flow shower heads, low flow washing machines, things like that. We've been seeing consumption decline. And as Jay mentioned, we'll get into a little bit as well, we do see volatility from year to year, which is predominantly due to weather. And that's, that volatility in consumption directly impacts the volatility of the revenue that is needed to support the financials of the system. If we can go to the next slide, Jay, please. Just perfect. Thank you. Read my mind. I'll talk a little bit about the financial plan. We have developed a very comprehensive financial planning model for the town, which we use and update very frequently and run different scenarios. This takes into consideration things like the water and the sewer funds operating expenses, primarily driven by that MWRA assessment that Jay already talked about, making up about 70% of the total operating budget. But there's also other operating expenses, understanding how those are changing over time. And we forecast that over a 5 to 10 year window, predominantly focused on the first 5 years and mostly focusing on the upcoming fiscal year, which we're talking about tonight, fiscal year 2024, just seeing how those costs are going to change. We also take into consideration debt service schedules, your existing debt service payments that you require principal and interest on an annual basis, as well as future debt service to be able to finance the capital improvements that Jay alluded to earlier, again, to maintain that integrity of the system. And that allows us to forecast out an annual revenue requirement or an annual cost that needs to be recovered from water and sewer rates. And then we can compare that against revenues under existing rates and see how much of a gap we have, how much revenues are under those revenue requirements with the existing rates and how much we need to increase rates by on an annual basis. We like to look out that 5-year window just because we want to understand what's coming. If we look at a singular fiscal year in a silo, it can set ourselves up for something that's coming that we're not planning for, and that could lead to a significant rate increase or a rate shock. And we want to try to have more programmatic, smaller rate increases on an annual basis as much as we possibly can. Another thing we take into consideration with the financial plan is the reserve fund balances, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. We go to the next slide, Jay. So what we are recommending is a 4.5% across the board rate increase to all water and sewer rates with the existing rate structure. We utilize fiscal year 2023 revenue projections and consumption as a baseline for our fiscal year 2024. That's kind of a we think that's a reasonable year for purposes of making some forecasts. We're also assuming that we're not utilizing any of the reserve funds. We're actually trying to replenish those reserve funds, and I'm going to talk about that on the next slide, why we're trying to do that. So although we could utilize some of those reserve funds, that would put us in a less financially viable situation or a less financially flexible situation. And I think we actually need to go in the other way and start replenishing those reserves. So we're assuming no reserve funds are going to be utilized to offset this rate increase. Although we are thinking ahead to year 2, 3, 4, 5 of the forecast out, obviously, we are only focused on fiscal year 2024 tonight, but this should be updated annually. Financial plans are living, breathing documents. Go to the next slide. So a little bit about reserve funds. Everybody on this call should have a savings account just for those what ifs, those rainy days, not sure what's going on. Water and sewer funds are no different, especially with regard to the potential volatility in consumption that we see from year to year due to weather. And that directly impacts the revenue that is collected from consumption, which is the vast majority of the source of water and sewer revenue. So if we have a very cool, wet spring, summer, fall, and consumption declines significantly, we're going to look at that in a little bit, how much of a revenue impact that could have. And having some reserve funds sitting there to be able to offset that volatility is integral to the financial health of both the systems. Another reason why we want to have reserve funds is just, regulations are changing on a very frequent basis. There might be, we do our best to plan what the capital improvements plan looks like, but there might be something that pops up we weren't planning for. We want to ensure that we're keeping track with those smooth, predictable rate increases for customers and not have to deviate that from too significantly. And the reserve funds will allow us to do that, to maybe mitigate an increase in one year and keep that same level of smooth increases going forward. We are recommending about 90 days of O&M. Or total revenue requirements to maintain in reserve. I know that's higher than a general fund typically keeps, but because of that volatility that is not really present with ad valorem, because of that consumption, we think it makes a lot more sense to have that level of reserve sitting in an account. Go to the next slide, Jay. And this is just illustrated even further. This is actually fiscal year consumption going back to 2017. And you can see the volatility that can occur from year to year. The largest reduction in consumption we saw was about a 5% reduction. And that actually results in about a $1.6 million reduction in 1 year. And so that just drives home the point of really needing to have those reserve funds to offset that, so you're not completely depleting your reserves or needing a mid-year rate increase or needing a significantly higher rate increase the following fiscal year to be able to keep the financial plan in the same strong financial position that we're trying to accomplish at this point in time.
Mike.
Sorry, I apologize for interrupting. It's a very helpful presentation, but that slide drives me bananas. Because you start from a base of 1,700, and it make the way the slide is the way the graph is constructed, it looked like these massive shifts, and it's a 5% shift. If you would in the future remember that there are some of us here who are very sensitive to the construct of these slides and start at 0 or somehow indicate that. In the graph that maybe indicate a percentage of change rather than indicate the absolute number, that would be very helpful to us.
Very
helpful to me.
Very fair point. We'll take that into consideration for, I'm sure, if I'm working with the town again next year, you will see a very similar slide to this. So I'll make sure to make that change. But the overall point of that, although a 5% doesn't sound like a lot, when you put that into dollars of 1.6 million, that could have a significant impact on the financials of the system in 1 year.
Oh, I accept the point. Absolutely.
Yep.
I understand, but that
Point well
5%
taken.
is very different in context than what you've got there.
Point well taken. Thank you. So this is a cash flow forecast. Again, starting with fiscal year 2023, kind of where we are currently, we're about to end fiscal year 2024, the rate increase we're talking about tonight. And then again, looking at that 5-year forecast, we're not voting on rates for 2025 and beyond, but we want to understand what's coming. So again, we can try to mitigate any sharp fluctuations and increases from year to year and keep that stable rate increase. So what we're showing right now is about a 4.5% rate increase over the entirety of the 5-year forecast every single year. Although, as I mentioned earlier, this should be updated frequently, at least annually, to make sure that we're on track with that and nothing has changed significantly for the better or the worse. We want to make sure that we're on top of the latest changes, and things can change very frequently, as we've all seen over the last few years. But with the 4.5% rate increase, this allows us to, the columns there are your revenue requirements or your costs, and the gray line going across is your revenues. So those revenues are meeting, and then, although it's hard to see on this graph, are actually exceeding in some instances and allowing us to start replenishing that reserve fund balance that was depleted over time without rate increases and due to declines in consumption that we've been seeing, or that volatility from year to year.
Okay, Miriam?
Sorry, thank you. I just need some clarification. This shows a 4.5% rate increase each year from 2023 to 2028. Is that correct?
It's a 4% increase starting in 2024. And then this graph is showing a 4.5% rate increase from 2025 to 2028, but we are not, that is not what we're voting on this evening.
Okay, thank you. That's what because what I thought I heard you say was each year, and I didn't think that's what we were voting on. So I needed that.
Great note. We are only voting on fiscal year 2024 this evening because that's the best information we have today. And we think a 4.5% rate increase is the right rate increase to accomplish all those goals that I went through earlier. With the best information we have today for the remainder of the 5-year forecast, we think it looks like a 4.5, but we're going to continue to update this annually. And next year we will come back for that vote for fiscal year 2025.
Okay. Before you get off this chart, I'm sorry. Before you get off this chart, it looks like there's a significant increase in debt service, proposed debt service over the next 5 years. Is there something in particular that's causing this?
Yeah, I'll address that. Under the DEP regulations with the lead and copper requirements, Jay had mentioned that over the next 5 years, we are going to have to, we'll complete a full inventory and assessment this coming year, and then we will be removing those lead service lines over the next 5 years. But that is that will be a multi-million-dollar project for the town under the water and sewer enterprise. We are showing that here, although our intent is to apply for state and federal dollars to help cover that, but we don't have that in hand at this point.
Okay, great. Paul?
I guess I just wanted to confirm what was said earlier, that we are just voting on the 4.5% tonight for this year.
Correct.
But that 4.5% is based on assumptions that we're going to grow 4.5% in the future years. If there was a different assumption, 4.5 might be different today, right?
Let me see if I understand your question. If you told me that, Dave, I guarantee you we will not have any rate increases from 2025 to 2028, and this is your one shot to increase rates for a 5-year period, yes, that 4.5% would be different. It would be something higher than that.
Okay, thank you. You answered my question.
You're welcome.
Okay, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Jay, I think we can go to the next slide. Thanks. This slide just presents the actual rates themselves, broken out by water and sewer, fiscal year 2023, and the proposed 2024 with a 4.5% increase. Just wanted to explain quickly, single-family residential customers are assessed volumetric rates in the top left portion of this chart here. For the first 1,800 cubic feet of consumption, 100 cubic feet is about 748 gallons. They are assessed currently $3 per 100 cubic feet. And then for every 100 cubic foot above 1,800 cubic feet would be assessed at $7.51. And those would then increase to the fiscal year 2024 values, $3.14 and $7.85. All customers not categorized currently as single family are charged currently at the other rate at $6, and that would increase to $6.27. That is $6 and $6.27 per 100 cubic feet, no matter how much 100 cubic feet are used or consumed. And then irrigation is at that same rate. I will mention that over the next fiscal year prior to 2025, the town is looking into how customers are categorized into different classifications. So whether they are in other single family classification, to ensure that all customers are equitably are placed in the right customer classification. This is going to require a full audit and to understand the impacts on not only the financials of the system, but also the equity and the customer impacts on all the residents. But it is something we're looking into. And then in addition to the volumetric charges, there are fixed charges by meter size. The vast majority of your customers are 5/8 inch. They're paying $34.19 currently per quarter. That would go up by that 4.5% to about $35.73 per quarter. Yes.
Finish up, but Miriam has
I have a question.
Yeah, but finish up your sentence.
Yep. And then those fixed charges obviously scale up based on meter size, which is industry best practice. It's reasonable to assume, just based on the capacity required for a 2-inch meter compared to a 5/8 inch meter, that there would be a higher fixed charge for those customers. And then just real quickly to wrap up on the sewer side, much simpler on the volumetric. All customers, no matter classification, are billed under a uniform rate per 100 cubic feet, either $8.99 or going up to $9.39 under the proposed 4.5% increase. And then the exact same fixed charges by meter size on the water. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bernard. So I'm going to refer to an email that we received at the select board that Aaron answered, but I think this is an appropriate time for us to actually bring it out to the public, which I appreciate, Aaron, your answer, and I appreciate, Dave, your answer as well, which is this I don't know how to put it, this inequity in the rates for other. So I really do appreciate that this is going to be addressed, because I read that email from her, which was very well written, and I was frankly very surprised at what she was saying. And this is a very helpful explanation. I understand where this is coming from. And for those who aren't following, condos essentially are paying more for their water rates than
Low
single
usage
family.
condos.
Right, low usage condos. That's a very important distinction. Low usage condos. So folks that are using smaller amounts of water are really paying the most, which, okay, fine, I understand. You know, when we buy things in more volume, it gets cheaper. But in this case, I don't think that's okay. So I appreciate that we're going to be taking a look at that in the future.
Right. And let's note, it's low usage condos with individual meters.
Yes.
So
low
often
usage
the condos have, 1 meter. So there's a larger volume going into, and so that actually benefits them to have this other rate. So it really will take sort of diving into it. I think it was a really articulate point that was made, and we'll be looking at it this year.
And my guess is you'll find some other you'll find some other little issues that are similar that, unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And before you go on, do we know how many residents we're talking about?
We have not started that analysis.
Okay, Paul?
It's still not clear to me why condos are being charged more than.
The issue is there's a fixed charge.
Yeah.
And the fixed charge, if you're using a relatively small amount of water, the fixed charge is a larger percentage of your bill.
Yeah.
And
If it's 1 meter for the whole condo,
right,
then you're using a lot of water, and the fixed charge is actually.
Yeah, you got the fixed charge for the 2 inch. Yeah,
but
for
the
a 2 inch
usage
line.
rate
But
is
these
lower or
are
higher. Okay.
Individual meters, so
Okay.
one single condo, so they're using much less water, and then the fixed charge becomes. Then they end up paying a lot more for a small use.
Okay.
I mean, they're small.
We're not fixing that tonight, I guess my point
No,
is,
but
but it's an issue.
Address, yeah.
The issue stems from condos which have units that are individually meters, because there are condos that have a large amount of units in them that have a master meter, one line coming onto the property. For those condos, they would not want to be placed in a single family residential rate structure as you see it on the screen, because the vast majority of their consumption would be billed at that $7.51. The issue is for customers who are categorized as condos but have a single individual meter for a single unit that could be categorized as a single family residential that are paying that $6 rather than getting the first 1,800 cubic feet at $3. And that is what we need to look into and identify who those customers are and rerun that rate analysis to make sure that we're doing things as equitably as possible. We're never going to, I've been doing this for well over a decade now. Completed hundreds of rate studies. It's impossible to design a rate structure that's perfectly equitable, but we want to do our best job to get as equitable as possible. And that's what we're going to try to accomplish over the next year when we start digging into some of these things.
So,
Hey, John?
Just to clarify, there is a distinction to be made between an increase in the rate and the increase that one experiences in one's bill. And if the rate is going up because the usage is going down, I know I have seen it in, other situations in past years. The amount that the actual bill goes up is somewhat consistent with the actual, level of the overall the overall rate increase. And I'm just wondering if that's the situation here. Are we talking a situation in which certain individual customers are seeing extraordinary increases in their bills or extraordinary increases in their rates, which then wash out to be comparable increases in their bills when looked at compared to other customers?
Neither.
Well, wait a minute. I didn't ask you, Mike. I'm sorry. I asked our expert.
So Dave, I'm
Why?
wondering whether you should do the next couple slides that talk about projected customer impacts. Even though it's providing still, again, that 4.5% for the coming year, but looking at it over, the next 5 years, just as a point of reference, and then maybe come back to Select Person Van Scoyak's question.
Yeah, that's fine. We can do that, and then I'll try to answer the question if I don't answer it in the next two slides.
Yeah.
This is presenting a typical single-family residential customer, what their bill would look like, what their bill currently looks like in fiscal year 2023, and how that bill would change with the 4.5% rate increase, assuming, and this I think is getting to your question, assuming the same amount of consumption. So if that customer, that typical single-family residential customer, uses the same amount of consumption from fiscal year 2023 to 2024, they will experience this increase. So currently, that typical single-family residential customer is paying $1,136.80 for combined water and sewer service over the course of the entire year, an annual bill. With that 4.5% rate increase, assuming the same amount of consumption, that same customer's bill would increase to $1,187.96. That's about a $51 per year increase. About $4.26 per month, or about 14 cents per day increase above what they're currently paying, assuming that same amount of consumption. Now, if a customer conserves water, they use less, they're going to pay less, except for that fixed portion, which does not vary based on consumption. But if they use less water, they will pay less. So if this typical residential customer starts using 5 CCF less per year, that bill will not increase to $1,187.96. It will increase to something less than that because of that reduction in consumption. And then we show the increases thereafter, assuming that 4.5% increase. Again, this is just for demonstration or presentation purposes, focusing only on fiscal year 2024 this evening. And then if we go to the next slide, we translate that.
Hold on just a second, Mike.
Yeah. So there's one thing I think that my understanding of this is correct, but my understanding is that at least since 70% of the charge for water is covering what the MWRA charges us, that a reduction in consumption doesn't touch that 70%. That we're still in effect. If we make a change, for example, if we make a change for those people in condos that have single meters per unit, and we reduce the amount of revenue that's coming from them, that revenue needs to be made up by distributing it across the entire system and similar or the entire body of payers. And similarly,
That is correct.
If we reduce the amount of water used, in effect, we're going to increase the cost per cubic foot.
Yes, I mean, one of the reasons we're seeing increases that we have been, like I spoke about early on in the presentation this evening, was reductions in per capita consumption and an overall decline in consumption. That is requiring higher rate increases than if consumption stayed level every single year. We would only be looking at increases due to cost. But because we do see reductions in consumption, that is reducing that customer base. And to your first point, you are correct. If one, to recover the exact same amount of revenue, if one customer's bills decreases or one group of customers' bills decrease, everybody else that does not decrease have to increase at least some amount to offset that to recover the same amount of revenue.
And is there any hope, any possibility that the fact that MWRA's costs appear to be fixed and growing, and there doesn't appear to be any downward flexibility if they're supplying less water? They have a set of fixed costs and they have to cover those no matter what.
That is largely true, sir. And, I think I don't work for the MWRA predominantly because I do a lot of work for MWRA customers like yourselves. Yep. And I think that's a bit of a conflict of interest. So I'm not intimate with their internal financials, but I know they do the best of their ability to mitigate increases on an annual basis. What you do have control over, though, is the allocation, especially on the water side, of all other communities. If you do reduce your consumption and say every other community increases their consumption, your allocation of the cost for that upcoming fiscal year will be lower.
Okay. All right. So that's really the only way out that we have is to, okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions or?
Why don't you go on? And
okay, great.
This is a public hearing, so we need to
I got
get to the public.
I think this might be my last slide. So and if I'm lying to you, I think it's my second to last slide, but I think this is the last one. This is just a comparison of that same typical residential customer's bill against other communities. So you can see Brookline fiscal year 2023 currently that $1,137. And then Brookline 2024, if we were to have the 4.5% increase going to $1,188 compared to the same level of consumption, the same type of customer in all these other communities, that are similar to the town. And you could see, you are on the low side there. And a lot of times when I do work for clients and they're on the low side of a bill comparison, it typically means that they're not doing what they need to do to reinvest in their system. And that is not the case in this town. So I think this is a positive image.
And if we had a newspaper, that would be a great headline.
My other clients that are on this chart are not going to be happy with me, but with that being said, I think Jay.
Yeah, I think we just have the proposed vote.
This is the the vote with the increases that we talked about and the rates that we talked about for this evening for fiscal year 2024 alone.
Okay, so this is a public hearing, and I'd like to open it up to the public to make their concerns known.
Would you like us to take the slides down for now?
Yeah, you can take them down. No, take them down. I have the that paper.
Okay.
Nothing you can do about that.
Mr. Fry,
Sir.
what saith you?
I don't want to.
Okay, Select Board Administrator Carey, Commissioner Galantine, Director Hersey, fellow members of the Water and Sewer Task Force. I'm Ernie Fry, Town Meeting Member Precinct 7. My wife and I are owner occupiers. My wife and I are owner occupiers of a condominium unit in a building with 5 other condominium owners, sharing a single 1.75-inch water meter. Most Brookline residents have no clear understanding of the actions taken by the DPW and the Water and Sewer Division to maintain the high quality of our water and the costs associated with that effort. It is important for this information to be better publicized. Few years ago, my associate David Lescoyer and I, with others, presented to town meeting a warrant article calling for an annual public hearing prior to setting rates for each fiscal year. Our meeting tonight is a direct result of the unanimous approval of town meeting of that warrant article. The bylaw calls for the public hearing to be held 21 days after public notice to the town meeting members and the general public of proposed rate changes for the coming year. For this hearing, that 21-day requirement was satisfied by a legal notice on page 26 of the May 9 Boston Herald mentioning the proposed 4.5 increase in the water and sewer rates for fiscal year 24. The next publicly available notice was a June 2 letter to the select board, included in the packet for tonight's meeting. I suggest that most Brookline citizens, and indeed most town meeting members, do not even know about a select board packet, and I'm sure many do not see or become aware of select board meetings. That many do not see these notices is not the fault of Brookline administration. You can only do so much. As a member of the task force, I support the rate increase as proposed this evening. My appeal tonight is that the process of notifying the community and especially town meeting members should be reviewed. I hope that consideration can be given to sending town meeting members a physical letter or email listing of the then current and proposed rates for the next fiscal year.
You have 30 seconds.
Such a letter could be sent at the same time the current legal notice is published or even in lieu of that notice. I appreciate the efforts of the commissioner and director in continuing the task force established by their predecessors. I hope that we have been a satisfactory sounding board for their proposals to the community and their plans for maintaining the stability of the Brookline's water system. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's go, yay.
And my name is David Lescoyer, town meeting member, precinct 11, and also living in a condo, 34 units, a 2-inch meter. I think we'll find that most condos in Brookline as rentable properties, as is required by law, are served by 1 meter. If there are any condos with multi-meters, it's an exception, probably an exception. Anyway, we'll find out. So I'd like to thank Jay Hersey, Aaron Galantine, and Raftelis, the consulting firm. And I urge, as a member of the task force, that we approve the fiscal 24 rates as recommended. And I want to turn to a particular area that Aaron mentioned and speak a little bit more about it. A few years ago, the Water and Sewer Task Force recognized that almost no one in Brookline could qualify for the unrealistically low thresholds and limited discounts available only to single-family home owning seniors. The task force therefore sought to consider a more robust discount policy. The task force, however, was stopped dead in its tracks as town council at the time brought to our attention a Department of Revenue interpretation of Broad versus Water Commissioners of Brookline, a court decision from 1921, which bars municipalities from providing discounts beyond what is currently allowed to senior residents because it would, according to the Department of Revenue interpretation, constitute discrimination against other ratepayers. The legal authority to offer a better discount program, therefore, requires a home rule petition, as Aaron explained. Town council drafted and the select board placed on the warrant a home rule petition in 2019, which town meeting approved, and apparently the select board never filed it. In my 2019 notes, I expressed concern about the proposed home rule petition warrant article because it seemed too skimpy, vague, and it would probably die after a single State House hearing to which Brookline is entitled. Select Board member Ben Franco, speaking for the Select Board at the special town meeting in 2019, acknowledged that these concerns and pledged that the Select Board would improve the home rule petition language before filing. Apparently that didn't happen. I
You have
now
30
urge the
seconds.
Select Board to craft and sound a home rule petition and follow through with ultimate approval. And once this authority has been granted, craft a sound, comprehensive discount program. The American Water Works Association M1 Manual, Principles of Water Rates, Fees and Charges, Chapter 16, which is called Low Income Affordability Rates, discusses a variety of alternatives. Among these, I urge that Brookline consider a voucher or coupon program that, in addition to homeowners, could also deliver discounts to cost-burdened meterless renters and condo owners.
You've reached 3 minutes.
One last sentence. I would like to thank the Commissioner of Public Works and Town Council who have already discussed this matter and are in the process of outlining a roadmap forward. I believe that we all agree with the aim to make Brookline more livable for senior citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
At this time, there are 5 virtual attendees and 3 in person. No one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Okay, so I'd like to close the public hearing and continue any further questions from the Select Board before we take this up for a vote. Miriam?
Yeah. First, I just want to thank you. Very thorough, and I appreciate that. You answered all the questions I had coming into this meeting. I also appreciate that. To Ernie and David, thank you. Also, I imagine it's easy enough to post a letter on the TMM listserv next time around. So I think that's a great idea. I don't know who makes that decision, but I think it's a great idea. And I mean, I would say I'm in support of this. It's been explained to me in a way that I understand and agree with.
Okay, all 6 votes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes. Oh,
So I do want to speak to the issue of seniors and affordability. A recent Brookline Community Foundation report, Understanding Brookline, was just recently published, and they're reporting that poverty among residents age 65 and older has grown from 7.8% in 2010 to 10.7% in 2020. So we're going to assume it's probably a little bit higher 3 years later than 2020. As Mr. Lescalier had mentioned, 2019 town meeting did approve warrant Article 8. And it was a home rule petition asking the legislature to authorize the town of Brookline to offer a senior discount program for water and sewer rates. And as he had mentioned, the request was never filed by the Select Board to Rep. Vitolo, and therefore he's never filed it. We have continued to offer a senior discount program. It's in front of us tonight for seniors age 65 and older. So we have a precedent. We've done this. We're doing it. You're asking us to approve it this evening without having a home rule petition. So the current discount program has been used by a whopping 6 applicants in the past year for a total average discount of $45. I understand from a letter that Mr. Lescalier sent along to the board outlining some concerns he had in the 2019 home rule petition, that at that time, 7 seniors had actually applied for the discount program. So we're down 1 senior. I don't want to speculate why, but you know, we're not, this is really kind of proof that the current program is completely ineffective in addressing the needs of our cost-burdened seniors. Surrounding communities have figured this out. Whether home rule petitioner, I don't know. how they've done it, but Newton offers a 30% discount on water and sewer rates annual for seniors, qualifying seniors. Somerville offers 25% discount on water and sewage for qualifying seniors. Cambridge offers all seniors 65 years and older a 15% discount up to $90 per year. They don't even have to, I don't even think they have to qualify for much other than saying, I'm proving I'm 65. And in Cambridge, Clause 41C seniors get a 30% discount up to $180 per year. Boston, our three-sided neighbor here, offers a 30% discount on monthly water charges only. So the surrounding communities have figured out how to do this for seniors. Why is Brookline so far behind? So I'd like to make a proposal tonight. I'm going to offer an amendment. I hope I would get the support of my colleagues. We have precedent of offering a discount. Today, it's 50% of the base charge, which is essentially the meter charge. And to date, that's been getting 6 seniors $45, a $45 discount. I would like to propose this evening that we amend the motion for the water, for the discount, not the rates. I'm very impressed with the water rate structure. The capitalization, all the work that you've done is quite amazing, and I'm impressed by it, and I thank you for it. But I would like to propose this evening that we move the 50% discount to 100% discount. Why 100% discount? Well, the 100% discount recognizes that we have a growing burden, cost burden population with our seniors. I don't expect this to be a significant run on the bank. It's a $32 million budget. The current, if we were to double it, which is essentially what I'm proposing, we're talking about $540, in total, if what I was told the $45 was accurate. That's 0.00000017 of the budget. I don't think it's going to make much of a dent. It's a simple change, and it caps us because it's not based on usage. It's just the meter fee. I do recognize that this will not deal with condominium owners, people that don't own a property, that aren't qualifying for the 2 clauses, 41C, and I think it's 17D, which is what the program is based under. But I do think this will send an important message that we hear that our seniors are cost burden, we care that our seniors are cost burden, and we're responding that our seniors are cost burden. And I would strongly encourage the continued work by the committee that's looking at rates to figure out how we can extend the discount programs to all individuals that are cost burden, not just seniors. So I have given the motion to Devin. If she wants to project it, I'd be happy to show it to you. It's a 2-character change on the rate structure. It essentially just changes it from a 50% of the water and sewage base rate to 100% of the water and sewage base rate. And again, I do not expect that this would be a major run on the bank by changing the percentage.
Or a major benefit to more than 6 people.
Well, we might see that actually maybe the 6 turn to 12.
Miriam?
Thank you, Bernard. So first I want to say, I totally agree in theory. I'm happy to support it. I agree that it probably has very minimal impact on the bottom line. I just wondering if you spoke to Commissioner Galantine about this before presenting it to us. I just feel like that's something that is worth at least a phone call to her to say, hey, I'm going to propose this. And I don't know where town council, I don't know where town council sits on this, but
Yep.
I don't have any problem with the theory of it, with voting for it, supporting seniors. I'm a little uncomfortable with kind of just that second part of it that I referred to.
Yeah, well, that's great feedback. Thank you. Remember, this stuff shows in our packet very late. We get almost no notice of these types of things. It took a number of phone calls and emails and a complex investigation on my own part to find out what other communities are doing. So that took my morning. No, just hear me out. I'm responding to
didn't say
your
anything.
feedback. You're shaking your head. And certainly, with more notice, of rate changes and the impact, I had to make this recommendation before hearing a public hearing. I had to gather and speak to people and reach out. So good feedback. I will do my best in notifying those individuals who are in charge of rates. It really is a tiny change. But thank you for the
I
feedback.
guess my concern is that this is sort of sudden. It's a major change, although it's only 6 people and maybe $45 each more. But I think that the task force is or should be looking at our rate structure on sort of a global scale, and take up that issue as well as other issues, after such a study. The idea of us voting it tonight is just not good practice. Haven't had an opportunity to think about the consequences, to address issues of the need for home rule, legislation. So I would be opposed to the change. Wait.
I think Mike was first, yeah.
Yeah, Mike.
Well, we do have the opportunity to ask Commissioner Galantine because she's right here. Recognizing that you're perhaps hearing this for the first time, Aaron, I wonder if you could give us a comment.
Yes, we are hearing this obviously for the first time. So this was not brought to my attention, although the overall interest in the senior exemption certainly was, and hence we did research on our end as well. So I would say that generally a change in rates on the floor is something that we would have a very difficult time accommodating, as the budget's been set and the rates are set specifically to that budget. In this case, given the small volume of participants, I think that it is something that we can adjust to. So I fully leave this in the hands of the board, but appreciate the sentiment that changes or conversation about impacts or changes, if they could come to the department first, we would be better prepared to let you know if that's something that's tenable.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I thought I had my hand up.
Yeah,
sorry.
John,
Sorry,
John, wants you. And then you're on notice. We want to hear from you, Joe. If you want to talk, I mean, maybe.
Yeah. Not sure to whom I should direct this, but probably Aaron, and perhaps members of the committee that has been studying all of this. Do we really know for a fact that only 6 people are going to continue to qualify for this? Or given that this was under the cloud of something that we had determined needed a home rule petition, but then had not sought the home rule petition, I'm going to assume we weren't actively promoting this program to anybody, but maybe I'm wrong. And I'd love to get somebody's knowledgeable, informed projection of has it ever even been studied as to with a lot of salesmanship and engagement of the community and advertisement, how many people might qualify to receive this who are eligible, as it says in the vote that we are being asked to take, under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clauses 17D, 41A, 41C, and the Senior Work-Off Tax Program. And if I may ask my colleague, did he do the research to see how many people might qualify under those provisions of eligibility?
Well, sure. I did do the research, John. In fact, so to answer your 2 questions, first, the water discount is prominently promoted on the assessor's page with all the other senior discount programs.
Mhm.
So it is as well marketed as any of our other senior discount programs. And my research was to ask the town administrator how many individuals qualified and took advantage of the senior discount program. It was 6.
No,
So
but how
that was
many,
my research.
how many would be eligible
The same number.
by the terms, no, by the terms of these eligibility guidelines? Is
The
that what you're saying?
the eligibility guidelines have not changed. I'm keeping the eligibility guidelines the same. I'm not touching that. All I'm doing is suggesting is that we increase the discount to those who are already eligible. It's an already in force program. Those three areas that you mentioned, the three programs, 41C, I forget all the numbers, 17D, the work-off program, that's the qualification today. So the individuals that qualify for that have applied and have gotten a $45 discount. I'm suggesting that we increase that to 90 or whatever the average.
Yeah,
would be.
okay.
So the alternative that I'm offering is that we actually study this and see whether this is a good idea, in the context of our overall rate structure, as well as what type of impediments there may be to more than 6 people applying for the program or qualifying for the program. That such a so-called deep dive, I think would reveal a lot that may be more useful to us than making this decision tonight. Let me ask town council, only if you have something that you want to say it.
I also want to let you know that the finance director is also with us this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, Joe Callahan, Town Council. The problem with a public lawyer giving legal advice in a public meeting, I have something to say, but I'd much prefer being able the opportunity
Okay,
to say this.
sit down then.
Yeah, that's
Sit
fine.
down then.
That's fine. You're not gonna.
I'm not going to let
I don't
him do
wanna
that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
So now let's listen to Lincoln Heineman.
Bernard, I would like to just reply quickly to what you just said. So I understand studying, and we're great at studying stuff. I actually said this at town meeting. We're famous for studying things. But we've had 4 years to study this. The home rule petition was approved in 2019. I don't understand why it wasn't filed. I'm not sure why. Certainly, for some reason, it wasn't followed up on, but the need was still out there. And I couldn't have been the first person to ask how many individuals qualified for the program because it was in Mr. Lescalier's memo. So we knew at that time that there were 7, and now we have 6 that have made the effort to qualify for the program. And they've qualified. Now, maybe doubling it from 50% of the meter fee to 100% of the meter fee might get a few more people to say this is worth the effort because $45 isn't. Maybe it will happen. But I just, the one of the things that I've heard over and over from seniors in our community is we do not take them into consideration when we're setting policy. We often overlook them. And this is a perfect example. I appreciate all of the work and the detail analysis the consultants did. It's remarkable what they did. But the senior discount is a fraction of a rounding error, and it didn't get paid attention to. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to start putting a stake in the ground when we can, when the opportunity arises, like tonight, to say seniors matter. This is a very low risk adjustment. And I would just encourage us to adopt it and still do the deep dive study because I don't think it's sufficient enough. It's just my.
No one on this board denies that seniors matter. Really are concerned about how everything we do has to be with seniors in mind, because we recognize the stress and pressures they're under in this town. My concern is that raising it from 50% to 100% seems arbitrary and not based on a study or consideration of all the issues and consequences of doing that, as well as based on the opportunities that maybe a better approach or a different approach would offer to provide real benefits to the senior population, in addition to the 6 who are receiving $45 each from this program. So,
I'm just.
okay, I'm sorry.
No.
I saw you out the side of my peripheral vision.
I think, look, it's a valid point. We get stuff late. We don't have a lot of time to act. I don't think the response is then for us to act too quickly. And I have to say, I really feel like Commissioner Galantine, it's a courtesy to notify her. And I'm really, while I support the theory of it, I'm not going to be able to vote yes for it tonight because of that.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Would it be possible to get comment from Lincoln Heineman on this? I thought he looked like a person who wanted to comment on this.
I didn't want to put him on the spot. right?
And if you don't,
You're on the spot, Lincoln.
I'm okay. Good evening. I'm okay being put on the spot about it. Lincoln Heineman, the town's finance director. I just wanted to fully answer Select Board Member Vince Goyek's question regarding what we think is the total eligible number of seniors for this. So as it's Mass General Law, Chapter 59, and the various sections 17D, 41C, and 41A in your proposed vote of that would delineate the seniors who would be eligible. So 17D is based on simply assets, not income at all. In fiscal year 2023, there were 4 seniors or coupled seniors, married seniors who were applied for and received that. 41C is based on income and assets. And in fiscal year 2023, that was 10. So that's where that 14 number comes from. And then 41A, Mass General Law, Chapter 59, 41A, that's the section of Mass General Law that refers to deferrals. So not a forgiveness of taxes, but a deferral of those taxes with a low interest rate until the property changes ownership. That's 9. So 22 from fiscal year 2023, that's a population of 22 taxpayers who we think could potentially be eligible. We do think that is pretty robust representative of who may be eligible. Because the assessor's office has done quite a lot of research over the last few years. I'd focus in particular on, it was either last year or the year before, I think it was two years ago, where in every single census that was mailed out to every single home in Brookline, there was a fact sheet on all of the exemptions and deferrals that taxpayers, particularly senior taxpayers, are eligible for. So we do think, that is perhaps not reaching the entire population, but a pretty close resemblance of the entire population, since that outreach is going on, and we're certainly redoubling our outreach now through different avenues. So 22, we think is a pretty good representation of the complete eligible population.
thank you. But if I may just follow up with a question, are any of these based on income eligibility? I've heard you mention, asset eligibility, but are any of these provisions based on income eligibility?
41C.
Yes, Chapter 41C is based on income and assets, and deferrals, Chapter 41A is based on income.
Because I know I've heard you say, and accurately on past occasions, we don't gather information on incomes at the local level, at the municipal level in Brookline. So do we have the information that we would need in order to assess what the total pool of eligibility would be under whatever are the income-based eligibility guidelines within this group?
So we have that data with respect to if the senior citizen reductions continue to be tied to these clauses, 17D, 41C, and 41A, that's where we collect the income information. But if, for example, deferrals in fiscal year 2024, the gross income cannot exceed $96,000. However, if a homeowner chooses not to apply for a deferral because they want to retain the entirety of the equity in their home, right? We wouldn't have the income information for those people. So we have the income information insofar as it's tied as it is now to these deferral levels. But to the extent that someone is above these income levels or chooses not to apply for them, then we wouldn't have that income information. I hope that answers the question.
So-
Okay.
So the 22 is the number, is the.
Yeah,
proposal.
I just worry we're talking past each other because the intent of my question is, do we know what is the total pool that would qualify? Not know based on how many people have come forward to ask to receive these exemptions, but if everyone who qualified came forward, do we know what that number would be? And I'm not sure we have the information to come up with that number.
No, to the complete pool, we just have who has applied for it. And I do think, I think based on that outreach, for example, in the US Census mailing, I would hope and think that many of the people who are eligible have applied, but we don't know that for sure. No.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, although the hearing is closed, I will allow Rennie Fry to say a few words.
Thank you, Chairman Green. There's one other qualification that these applicants must meet, in that they also must receive a bill from the water department. Many of these people probably live in condominiums or live in multifamily housing for which the water bill is not in their name. That could be why there's such a big discrepancy between the 6 that's been reported this evening as receiving the benefit and the 22 that seem to be eligible for it. I don't know. I haven't done the research to know that that's what the case is, but I know in the past that has been a consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is to take a vote on Paul's amendment. So all, and we know what it is, right?
Yeah.
Changing it from
Okay.
the base meter from
Right.
50 to 100%.
Changing 2 digits.
It is a small change.
So all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John?
No.
Miriam?
No.
Mike?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Chair votes no.
Bernard,
So-
I would like to make one quick comment after the vote,
Um,
if it's possible.
Quick comment.
So I do hope that that the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee, whatever we're calling it, is going to rapidly take up this issue. And I don't know if they can come back mid-year, or do we have to wait another year before we can actually offer senior discounts, expanded discounts? But to lose another year after already losing 3 years is just, it's a little heartbreaking, actually. But maybe someone could answer that question. Can we do a mid-year, 3-year, 3-month adjustment to rates, or?
Well, and one thing we have to do is file warrant article and file the home rule petition. So we're talking about at least, into the next year anyway.
Okay, so we do have to file the home rule petition in order to do this,
But what I would say is that
to do a comprehensive change.
I think the task force and the members hear the select board's consensus on this, which is obviously they're looking for solutions to this and creative solutions. So I think the task force, given the people that have been on it and the work they've been doing, which thank you for all the work you do, it's a lot of very technical work, and you become experts in the field just by virtue of this effort. So thank you. I hope you'll take that, the kind of consensus you hear from the board about thinking creatively as we work through these issues, not just, what should the end result be for this once the home rule petition passes the legislature and goes through all that process, but what else can we be doing? What else can we be looking at? I think that's I think that's a fair representation of what the kind of board's discussion is tonight.
Okay, so unless anyone objects, I'd like to call a vote on the recommended votes for water and sewer rates. And I think for purposes of the record, I need to read each one. There's 7 votes. Is that correct, Town Council? I can what bundle? Okay, so I'll just read through all of them fast. Yeah, what is this side conversation going on over here?
David.
We can all read. You really have to read this thing?
Pardon me?
As
Do you really have? to-
as is presented in the packet.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
As presented.
Yeah.
So I move approval of the recommended vote for fiscal year 24 water and sewer rates at 4.5% increase. The 7 individual votes that are listed in our packet, and everyone has in front of them and can read. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Paul?
No.
And chair votes aye. Okay.
I'd like to thank the
we're-
board. Thank you very
Thank-
much for your
Thank you.
support, for your thoughtful comments, and we look forward to the study in the year ahead. So
Great.
we'll be back with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay,
Agreed.
let's,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, let's go back to item 6, human resources policies, if we can get Ms. Braga to speak.
Good evening,
Good
everyone.
evening, Ann. Okay, we hear you now.
Thank you. Too much tech in my office. What can I say? Good evening, everyone. My name is Ann Braga. I'm the HR director for the town of Brookline, and I'm here to present several proposals for your consideration and later vote for the classification and pay plan for the town of Brookline employees. You have in your packet a summary memo and 3 distinct policy proposals. Within the summary memo, one thing is to increase vacation leave from beginning at 2 weeks up to 4 weeks for non-union town employees. And these would be the folks outside of the mid-manager technical professional employee group, which the select board and HR board approved increase in vacation last year. So this would be all the other non-union folks that would be in the classification and pay plan. As attachments, you have a proposal for paid parental leave, which was brought before the select board, albeit with different members, several years ago. And the adjustment to the proposal is to have 4 weeks of paid time to eligible employees. This would be in addition to their accrued leave time for the birth or placement of a child. It would be effective in January of 2024 in order to get the appropriate documents and payroll support in place to run this program effectively. And what this does is provide for 4 weeks of time to eligible employees. These are going to be, again, non-union employees across all grades and types. But the paid parental leave would be something, obviously, for bargaining purposes with our represented employees moving forward with the next round of collective bargaining. And this would give them 4 weeks of paid time in addition to their accrued leave. And they would be able to then, after the 4 weeks, regardless of gender, choose to use the applicable either sick family, sick time, or vacation and A-day time for the remaining amount of time that they would take. A change that's happened since last review of paid parental leave has been that the fire union has won a state labor relations decision that has given them access to their sick time, unlike any other town employee, access to their regular sick time for up to 12 weeks for birth of a child. And these are for non-birthing parents for the most part. Whereas our policies currently provide that for non-birthing parents, they don't have access to their personal sick leave because the definition for use of that time is for their own individual health condition that prohibits them from being able to work. So that is a change that's happened under a DLR decision specifically for firefighter union members only. And I wanted to bring that forward to you as a change from the last time this was presented to the select board and just the change in that status. All other unionized and non-union employees, their leave requirements are defined, continue to remain defined as sick time for individual sick use and sick in family for family members. The drug and alcohol testing policy, when this was presented the last time in combination with the annual health screening, there were questions from Select Board Member Ashkenazi. She and I met several times to discuss her concerns over the equity in enforcement and answering those questions, and particularly dealing with the issues around marijuana and legalization for recreational use, and how that would impact town employees. And so we do have, and what was already in there was a real-time observation to be conducted as part of the testing, so that we could provide additional information regarding intoxication by direct observation if test results for marijuana were to come back positive. This again would go into effect on January 1st, 2024, in order to get the training for supervisors and information to employees in place, as well as the codes for the annual health screening that is a companion piece. And we have put forward the testing policy as well as the health screening to all of our collective bargaining units, to which the engineers have been the only group so far that have accepted it, whereas AFSCME has said when everybody else does it, they will do it as well. The annual health screening is a program that I will admit freely to have stolen from the city of Boston, where I was beforehand, which allows for a full shift of time outside of employees' accrued time to be used for either an annual physical or cancer screening. And as we know that some of those screenings, as we tend to get more senior in service, tend to take a little more time than maybe when we are newer to employment. So that is there, and would be a separate pay code for our employees to use as well. I did provide language on a proposed vote, and I will entertain any questions or concerns you might have, but my understanding is that this would come for a vote at the next select board meeting, as is your practice to consider at one meeting and vote at the next.
I have a question.
Who's first?
Paul, go ahead.
Thank you, Ann. Very helpful. I just had one question about the cancer screening. I assume that I looked at the form, but I just wanted to confirm that that's just confirmation that a screen has taken place, not even the type of screen. There's no indication of medical information other than that a test has been done, correct?
That is correct. And you know, it can be as simple as going to your dentist where they do an oral cancer screening at your dentist.
Yeah.
Not just specifically, say, for example, going for a colonoscopy or something more detailed than that. It is just saying, yes, I was, you know, the employee was there for a cancer screening on that day and is signed off on by the practice. It isn't even the doctor per se. It can just be, you know, Dedham Health Associates.
Thank you.
Mike.
I have a question about the on the drug screening policy. My understanding, and my understanding is third hand or second hand, not personal experience, is that marijuana tends to be persistent in the system, and I have no idea what 50 nanograms per milliliter amounts to in terms of, you know, how much of the active ingredient is present in the bloodstream, but marijuana is legal. It's legal to consume marijuana. I wouldn't want somebody to be penalized for consuming marijuana a week earlier and then having a test that showed some residual amount. I wonder if you can speak to that, the issue of the amount and the mechanism that would be used to make sure that somebody who has used it legally and is not impaired is not penalized.
Sure. So the amount is defined by the National Transportation Safety Board. And that is, it's the same amount that is used for CDL drivers. We didn't want to make up our own number. But what we added to this is, one, we're not doing randoms. So it isn't just, okay, your name comes up on a list. it is only if you are displaying symptoms of some kind of intoxication, you have been observed by 2 trained individuals as to behaviors that show intoxication. And then the other option is that if it is after an accident where you're on the job and there has been either a tow truck called for any vehicle, an ambulance called for any individual, or there's been a fatality. And this is, really a safety mechanism. It is not for systemic use, but is to judge the safety in the moment. And the reason why we have included with the protocols for both reasonable suspicion and post-accident is an observation of the person, is to say, does someone smell of marijuana? Does someone not able to carry on a coherent conversation, have bleary eyes or other indicators of intoxication that have been standardized? And that would be looked at with a positive test result. So if, for example, you are in an accident and you appear to be as sober as a judge, right? You're answering questions coherently, you don't smell of alcohol or marijuana, and you function as you normally would, as the folks who know you would know that. That is taken into account with the positive results, and the determination can and may be that you don't violate the policy, even if the positive test result comes in. And that was a concern, I know, of Select Board Member Ashkenazi as well the first time around. But it is with contemporaneous, trained observations at the same time, because there is no way to detect intoxication due to marijuana. The state police are dealing with it all, and so are the public safety agencies. And what we're looking to do is just be able to identify if there is intoxication. And if there is an effective test that comes out, then we would bring that before you, obviously, as a change. But this is not to punish someone. It may be in your system for up to 30 days. And if you're successful in weight loss, it can be even longer. But to look at that, and the contemporaneous behavior is how we're looking to address marijuana specifically. As far as legality in the Commonwealth, we are a recipient of federal grant funds, and we do have to be careful under the federal drug-free workplace policy that we are putting measures in place to assess use of substances, which at the federal level, marijuana is still a Schedule I substance, but use of substances while on the job.
Okay, thank you.
Miriam?
Thank you. Thank you. And so I want to first clarify that for me, the biggest issue with the drug and alcohol policy is that it not be arbitrary in any way, right? That it cannot be applied arbitrarily. There have to be as objective as possible reasons for testing. And that's what Ann and I really went over in detail. Not specifically to marijuana, to just that it should be applied objectively, because there's lots of evidence that in the past it's been used, not necessarily in Brookline, I mean, generally, that it can be used in order to get somebody out of a job that their employer doesn't want them in. So I appreciate all the work on that, Ann, and I appreciate it did take many meetings till we kind of found something that was workable and I felt comfortable with. So I appreciate that. I do want to say that I support all 4 of these policies. At our last retreat, Paul was there. We spent a lot of time talking about employee retention. This is employee retention. People care about this stuff. And when we're trying to hire people and we're trying to keep people in these positions, this stuff really matters beyond just the base salary. So I especially want to point out the stillborn clause in the paid parental leave. I think it's really important we have that in there, and I appreciate that. I can't even imagine what that would be like, but then to have to come to work Just, so I appreciate all of it, and it has my support. And if you all scroll down to the financial and operational costs, it's nominal considering what this could do to our retention, right? So losing people has a cost. So if you weigh the cost of having to hire new people, I think this, for me, this balances that out. So I'm supportive of all 4 of these.
Any other discussions? So, I'd like to take them separately. I think I'd like to sort of feel out the board in terms of the paid parental leave. Because I do have some issues there or questions. Does anyone object to that?
No.
No.
Okay.
Are you
Yeah.
talking about because I think as Ann said, if you're talking about voting, you don't have to vote tonight. This is not typically.
Yeah, did I say voting? I meant.
You
a
want to
discussion.
discuss
Yeah.
this.
Discuss it.
separately.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
No, I may have said
No,
voting.
no, I misunderstood you. That's my fault.
Okay.
My fault.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I guess the question with respect to the paid personal leave or parental leave is, number one, who's asking for this? And are employees asking for it? Now, we can say we just give it to them and encourage people to work for the town and not leave the town. I'm not sure that that's a good answer. And secondly, do we have the budget to pay for it? Because according to the materials, this is going to start in 2 weeks, not January. Is that did I get a bad copy of your memo?
I believe it was the vacation for the 20 employees was 2 weeks. It would start at the beginning of FY24, but the other policy for paid family leave and
What it says here?
Let me double check because I thought that recommendation was on the.
Okay.
But no, it says here on it's 6A. You might have an earlier version of the memo. Adopting the paid parental leave, alcohol, drug testing, and annual health screening policies effective January 1st, 2024.
Okay.
And I would say on that front, I would actually defer to Ann on what she's been hearing from employees about the current employees on the desire there. On the financing front, no, we did not build this into the budget. So we would need to think through where the money would come from and how. But that's something we could do in November as part of the reconciliation process. Or it's something that if you wanted to make it part of the, I think rather than having it, kind of be reconciled, scotch taped, if you want this to be an ongoing policy going forward, you might defer implementation until FY25, till July of next year, so that it could be part of the formal budgeting process and not just kind of, scotch taped into the budget this year.
Yeah. What do people think about that?
If I can speak
Yes,
to
ma'am.
Bernard's question, the cost of $202,000, which is 4 weeks at 100%, would be if we did this townwide, because I wanted you to see what a cost would look like townwide. Given that
Townwide as opposed to what?
as opposed to non-union only.
Oh, okay. I thought this was for non-union only. I mean,
It
union.
is for non-union only, but ultimately, if we're looking at, this being a bargaining issue moving forward, I wanted you to have an understanding of what the cost impact would look like. So I gave you the estimates there. The escalator, provides 2 times the public safety salaries for coverage and overtime and working out of class. Most of the non-union employees that we have that would be eligible for this based on your vote don't have overtime or working out of class coverage in those departments. So you're looking at a higher cost share by unionized workforce than non-unionized folks. And that's why if you look at sort of the calculations that were reflected, include the collective bargaining, and then the note afterwards says that the data reflects, 61% of the annual reflects of the requests have come from public safety, and that 71% are from non-birthing parents, just so you have an idea of what the population is. And that tells us a couple of things. One, it tells us that our non-birthing parents, mostly men, are taking advantage of some FMLA time for birth of a child, but we are not, we don't have a lot of women or birthing parents who are of childbirthing age that work for us. We have a skew on sort of young and single, and we have some on the, have finished with their childbearing years. And so, but this was to give you an idea of a total cost if we were to do this townwide, so that as we build it out, and assumingly that it becomes a negotiation item for other, for collective bargaining.
So the townwide number is the actual number that we would be facing.
The townwide number would not be what fiscal 24 would look like, because
Okay,
this
but
would only
going,
be eligible for non-union folks.
okay, but going forward, that would be the number, because it's unlikely that that the collective bargaining units would not want to take up this also. Mike?
I don't know if you know the answer to this, Ann, but, and I'm not sure that well, to me, it's relevant anyway. What does the school department do with family medical leave?
So school department has, obviously the FMLA eligibility. School department employees do not have vacation time. They only have sick time and longevity days. They obviously have a different work calendar than the town side does.
Right.
And they have in the BEU collective bargaining agreement, they have up to 2 years unpaid for child rearing leave that they can take and then return to their position. What I will say is that in many occasions for the school side, folks will be out on child rearing leave and not come back to work for the town. And when they go from a paid status to a non-paid status, after the 12 weeks, they're responsible for 100% of their health insurance.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Miriam?
Yeah, so I am no longer a woman of childbearing age, but I want to say thank you for that, but
More than we needed to know.
I think you already knew that, but I do hire people, right, in my day job. I literally work with HR and I hire people. And I cannot speak specifically to the employees of the town because I haven't surveyed them, but I haven't yet met somebody who's out there looking for a job, who's in that category, who doesn't look at this. They ask. So I think, if you want to do a survey, you can, but I honestly don't think you need to. I really think that this is something I'm seeing personally in my hiring. And frankly, the cost benefit, because there is these benefits outside of salary are valuable to employees. So the cost benefit here to me is clear. But I think I've said that. So.
Okay, it's clear intuitively, but not,
Well,
we don't have.
I've had town employees personally come up to me and talk to me about this who want this.
Okay.
Women of childbearing. No men. Some men too. I've had women come up to me and talk to me personally who want this. Who are town employees.
Yeah, I've had male town employees talk about this to me. So maybe that's because you're
right.
Yeah, right.
I think, okay, John.
And thanks very much for all of this. I'm going to be guided in this by, one very simple idea, and that is that what I hear Ann saying from her position as our town human resources director is that the cost of not doing this is greater than the cost of doing it. Is that a fair summation of what you're saying?
Yes, it is. The average cost to replace someone who leaves because they don't have this kind of benefit or similar family-friendly benefits is about twice their annual salary by the time you have someone absent in the position, you recruit, you fill the position, you get them back up to skill level. It is a significant cost to when people leave. And I do think the folks that we will lose first are our mid-manager technical professionals as a result of this. And those are some of our hardest to fill positions.
And then there are people that we would fail to attract.
Yes.
Yeah.
To Ann's point about,
Yeah.
proof by absence, big reason why I stayed in my job in the city of New York, even though it was a difficult job and difficult times, was that I had paid leave when my wife was pregnant. It was a major driver. So it is something on that front where I speak from personal experience.
Okay, Paul?
So I support anything that we could do to make us a destination employer again, where people want to actually come and stay. But I'm concerned a little bit about the numbers and how that all works into the budgeting process and when's the right time to adopt the policies to attract, and implement so that we don't turn the budget upside down.
Right. I think to Ann's point about, if we start this mid-year, if you do a back of the envelope calculation and say, okay, what we're talking about in FY24 is maybe around $80,000 hypothetically that we need to work through. That is something that we can add. But we would need to simultaneously be really deliberate in thinking about FY25, starting in September, starting at the beginning of the budget process, building this into the global budget and making sure that we are budgeting in, as Bernard pointed out, the full amount. Expecting that we will be moving forward in this new cycle of collective bargaining and having this as a chip at the bargaining table.
Because we have a couple of contracts we just approved and they're expiring this month, right?
Yes.
So
Yes. I am.
we need to start that.
I am eager to get back to the bargaining table. So,
well, this might help.
yeah.
Well, it may increase.
Well, maybe it'll hurt, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that is the thing, right? We are in a space where it's tight. It's going to be difficult to think through, but I want us to kind of go into this with open eyes and, recognize, as Ann pointed out, the benefits to this at the mid-manager level, we estimate to be pretty significant. And we, in terms of, thinking through costing out what it would cost and how it will impact this year's budget if we start on January 1st, we'll have that information for you when it comes back to you next time in 2 weeks' time, so that you can make a determination on when you'd like to start it if indeed your decision is to move forward with it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so in terms of when this becomes effective, the policy right now says January 1st of 2024.
Right.
And you're saying that we can break into our piggy bank and find the money.
Well, I mean,
for that half year.
I think that coming in November, when we do that annual readjustment, it's not going to be easy. We already are in pressures, so I don't want us to think it's a walk in the park to find $80,000 in this budget. But we will, obviously, if this is a priority of the select board and the community, we will make that happen, and we'll find a way to make that work. And present you with options.
You're being asked to make a lot of things happen.
It is true.
And 80,000 here, 80,000 there, soon it becomes real money.
Yeah, I mean, well, 80,000. I mean, I don't want to lie to anyone. $80,000 is real money.
Yeah.
Even when people say, "Well, we're a town of a $410 million budget," $80,000 is real money. Every little bit helps. So we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of that.
Mary.
I'm just going to say that, yes, that's real money. But again, we're talking about money that if you're only looking at that number, you're missing the bigger picture, which is we're actually saving money by retaining staff.
Yeah, but the accounting of that is different from the accounting of, do we have money to pay the bill right now?
Yes.
And so I mean, I take your point, but that doesn't help us in terms of balancing the budget when we have to balance it. So, any other thoughts? Okay, I take it we're going to vote next, it's actually not next week, it's the 27th.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yep.
So let's agonize over this, digest everything we've heard, and come back with a well-informed position as to what we should do.
All right.
Good.
Right.
Okay. good.
Thanks. Thanks very much.
Do you have any questions about the other policies?
I don't. And,
No,
I mean,
yes.
Miriam asked a few questions about the alcohol and drug testing, seemed to
Good,
cover
we're turning
everything.
I mean, really, like 4 meetings.
So it came out well.
Thank you.
I just want to thank Ann for the
Yeah.
diligence in this. This is
Came out well for
this,
both of
this
you.
is a
yeah.
lot of work in a lot of varied areas
was-
towards the end of making, as Paul said, us a
Mm-hmm.
destination employer. So thank you, Ann. It's a great step in this direction.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Okay, and by the way, could we just make sure that in our packet on the 27th, it's clear as to when each one of these become effective?
Yes.
I mean, just so I don't get confused
No, fair.
or read the wrong document.
Fair.
Okay, moving on. Select board meeting policies and procedures. How do you want to deal with that? How do you want to discuss that? I'll start off by saying, you may recall last week, I suddenly switched from calling you by your first names to calling you by your last names. I got a little pushback from that, from surprising sources. And I'm back
You're
to,
surprised by those sources?
well, okay. So I'm back to calling you by your first names, which is how I like to function in
Yeah.
the world. Yeah, I've always been a very informal person, and it makes discussion easier. So that was one issue that was raised, and the other issue was whether everything should go through the chair. And although that gives me a lot of power, I think that conversations are smoother when we are able to, sometimes with a little chaos, just talk. The chair's role should be to keep you under control, stop over there having side conversations, slow down here, right, et cetera. But those are my thoughts in terms of those two issues, which were the two of the things that we were discussing with respect to board policies and procedures. We also have the public comment rules that we're going to take up. I did a slight revision of the existing rules. It's in your packet. But we can talk about that. I think Mike had an additional point, which I agree was very, very valid. Mary?
I had an additional point.
Yeah.
Did you want to go first?
The one thing that I would suggest that I don't see in here is that we should be asking people to limit themselves to something that's not on the agenda.
Oh, that was my point too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other than that, and I think that I think putting a nominal 15-minute rule on is very, very helpful.
Okay. And I'd like to suggest we change the 5-minute to 3 minutes.
Yeah, I agree.
Someone else brought that up, and I think that's a good idea.
With an option to ask for more time from the chair.
Yeah, I'd like to give, the chair a little bit of flexibility so that if there's a really, important conversation, that, we can say, okay, I'll give you an extra minute. Just.
So as someone who has
That's
come,
precluded.
as someone who has come before the committee many times and stood at the podium over sequential meetings, just a few quick thoughts. So one is only speaking on things that are not on the agenda. Sometimes there are things on the agenda that are not a public hearing. Right. So is that the qualification, don't speak on something that's not a public hearing.
No, I think
No.
at least for me, the qualification is don't speak on, if there's a public hearing later,
Don't speak on
that's
that.
when we want to hear you, not now.
Or if there had been a public hearing
Already.
previously. Remember on the advisory committee, subcommittees had hearings and people came and spoke, but when the advisory committee met, there was no public comment.
Right. But sometimes, and again, this is the cadence of the select board I'm learning, things get to us late. The public gets notice late. And then, they may not even attend a public hearing tonight, like things that we're doing, but they watch the recording, they hear from their colleagues or their neighbors. and they have an interest. And then when something comes back in 2 weeks, like these policies, that they may want to speak. And so I just wonder if, even though there was already a public hearing, if someone wants to speak to that item during public comment, if we're going to be taking a vote, just something to consider. I wouldn't want to preclude them.
I guess the thought that I have is that, for example, we got an email regarding water rates. It was very well put together, and it was probably more effective than somebody standing up here because we could read it a couple of
Right.
times and say, oh, all right. So that channel is always open. And I know for my part, I read everything of that sort, and I expect that, generally speaking, everybody does. So people do have a way to reach out and make their comments, even if they can't do it at the podium or on Zoom.
I'm just giving feedback on.
Yeah.
on-
No, well, I'm
I-
happy to
I
give
do
you the
think
feedback,
sometimes
yeah.
People, want to come. The other thing is, I think it said that you can't speak in sequential meetings on the same topic. Sometimes very complex issues are taken up by the board over multiple weeks.
That's a fair comment.
And, especially if it's a very, very hot issue, controversial issue. I know I've shown up multiple times and I've seen colleagues show up multiple times. Again, I hope that we would leave some wiggle room in the policy, and not really be shutting people down.
Yeah, I actually put in the sequential meeting thing instead of they can't speak for 4 weeks.
Yeah, who's going to keep track? Are you going to keep track of that?
Oh, that's Devin's
Devin.
job. As you may have noticed, I created this thing called the Assistant Town Administrator for Operations or other town staff person acting as the clerk and enforcing compliance with these procedures, which I think makes sense because you're in the best position to bring to our attention that someone is deviating from the rules. So,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Miriam.
No, it's okay. I mean, I'm I'm trying to think of how best to phrase this. I'm fine if there's been a public hearing and someone didn't get a chance to speak and they want to speak. That's not a hill I'm willing to die on. I respect that, Paul. That's fine. I'm really conflicted about this coming every meeting and hammering away at the same topic with the same points over and because frankly, it's exhausting for us. And especially if they're coming to harass one of us, which happens and has happened.
Yeah.
So while I totally agree, at the same part of me is like, I also think it's okay to put some controls in there so that that's not happening. Because also it keeps us from getting to the business of the board. And oftentimes it's the same people with the same comments and the same points every week.
That is a rare occasion, and it happened a few weeks ago. But in my
No, well, it's
not a rare occasion.
Think about the comments that we had on the Harvard Street proposal early on. We had someone who's
That's true.
he's
And our,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to.
oh, okay. I mean, he wasn't very happy when I said he'd come and harangued us, but he did.
Okay.
So I think it's more than maybe when we put it together. So I'm conflicted about that.
Yeah.
So that's where I am, I guess. I don't actually have an answer. I'm grappling.
Well, why don't we look at what I proposed and the original one and come up with any suggestions and compare it to the next meeting. I'm sorry, John. For next meeting and struggle over it then.
Well, you're 95% the
Mike,
way
I was
there.
just called on.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. And by the way, I know that I'm the instigator of, can't we have more clear rules on how to conduct conversations? But that's an example of the kind of thing that, is behind this request. I don't think it's too much to ask that people not just assume whenever they feel like breaking in, they can break in. And especially if somebody's had their hand up, or that people not have side conversations when there's a presentation going on. And that happens too. So if we can just kind of rein in, that temptation to just jump in at will, even if there's somebody who's been waiting and somebody who has their hand up, that would be nice. It doesn't require us to, use last names. It doesn't require us to speak through the chair. but at least it gives us some kind of an expectation that there's order to this conversation, and that if a person hasn't spoken yet, that maybe they'll get their turn next, instead of having to wait until other people stop jumping in all the time. So I'm sorry if I sound a little irritated, but it is something that has been on my mind a lot. And I wish I could figure out a polite, and comfortable way for everybody to just kind of find a little bit more of a responsive to everyone's participation, and not in any sense assuming that they're just at liberty whenever they feel like it to take over the conversation. So I wanted to, but the reason I raised my hand was to make this point. Aren't we in danger of sort of treading into that area that the recent court case said you really can't tread into? I mean, we might find it annoying that the same person comes back week after week, but if we have a public comment section, I don't think we can shut them down just because we're annoyed that they come back week after week to say the same thing, right?
Yeah, I would say that should be within the time, place, and manner, allowed restrictions. I mean, what the Supreme Court says is that you can't stop people from calling you nasty words or nasty names. You can't stop, what Miriam and Mike were subjected to a couple of weeks ago. But if they're being disruptive and putting the meeting in danger, making defamatory statements, I think we can stop them.
I do have one point on that.
Yeah.
Something that town council has reiterated over and over again in a recent webinar from MMA as well is the consistency is key. And so once you set these parameters, as long as it's the same every time, that is what will keep it within the bounds of the decision from the court case.
Okay, so that has to do with the public comment section. I want to respond to John's other comment. I think that what you're concerned about is really the responsibility of the chair to control things. And for example, during the water and sewer rates, the two of you were speaking, but I didn't intervene because it wasn't disruptive. And I think that that's my responsibility to make that judgment as whether someone's being disruptive or not. And yeah, so that's.
Can I comment
yeah,
directly to that?
sure.
Because I know Paula's hands is up, but this
Oh.
is just directly to that,
Mhm.
which is what Mike and I were doing, was actually clarifying something we saw on a slide.
Yeah, no, I picked that up, and that,
So-
but that's my responsibility to make that, judgment as to whether it's disruptive or not.
Sorry, thank you for letting me.
I wanted to just talk through kind of the practical application now that we're in person. So there may be some people on the screen that are remote. This is now the public comment part we're talking about. And I see Devin monitors who's there. Some people have their hands raised. She has no idea what they want to talk about, right? So she calls on them. I assume they could start talking and we might have to shut them down, tell them to stop talking. I don't know if you mute them. I'm not sure how to handle that. When hopefully we'll start to have robust public participation again. And, often there's a line, a window row, and you have no idea what they're coming to speak for. And I worry that we're going to have to start shutting people down. You're speaking on something that's not on the agenda or is on the agenda. You should stop talking. You've spoken twice in a row, please don't approach the podium. I do worry about enforcement and what that may seem like. It could be problematic.
Yeah, and there's no real answer to that or no real solution to that problem. Unless we just open it up and not, enforce some of these rules. Yeah.
I guess I'm maybe leaning towards what John had said. We have public comment. We have a 15-minute period. We time box it. People are allowed 3 minutes. You're going to take it from 5 to 3, and people are going to speak.
Yeah.
And it's if they sign up ahead of time and they say they want to speak on something, and Devin says, "Well, you really can't speak to that because it's whatever it's on the agenda or something," then she can head that off. But I think the vast majority of people that come to speak aren't signing up ahead of time, and they're speaking to us, on the spur of the moment.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And we should encourage that, actually.
I think it's good.
Yeah, yeah. So is in this this document that we've been using, that is addressed, and maybe we should take it out. In item 6, individuals may speak in public comment on the same topic, may not speak consecutively as a select board. So I don't know, what do you think of that?
Are you asking me?
Pardon me?
You asked, so
Well, since you raised
well, you were gesturing me. I want to make sure I'm not jumping in line of anybody. I would err on the side of less restrictions, frankly, than because it puts us into a position of having to shut people down. I realize that I haven't been through all of the uncomfortable haranguing experiences that some have had, but I do worry that we're going to get into this situation of significant conflict with the public that wants to speak. And if that's avoidable by time boxing it, you get 3 minutes. And set the expectations that if it's on the agenda, you should wait for the public hearing. I think that would make sense.
Where we have public hearings, that makes sense.
Bernard?
Yes, I'm sorry.
So to me, the main thing I'm interested in is setting a 15-minute limit, honestly, because I think that's a discipline that is valuable for us and for members of the public. The difficulty is if you say to somebody, you can speak on anything you want, and we have a 15-minute period, some people who want to speak on a topic that's not on the agenda that we really haven't had a discussion about or want to bring something to our attention, they may get squeezed out by that 15-minute limit. So it's a nuance, I guess. And one way to handle this is to say, well, let's put this in place and see how it goes. And as far as somebody coming in making nasty remarks, honestly, that rolls off my back. I have very, very thick skin.
Very.
Yes. And, somebody said, we know where you live, Mike. And my thought was, well, I know where you live. And so
To that point, I think it's in there, but just, you can, as the chair, you also have discretion to say, we have a lot of people signed up for public comment. Ordinarily, we ask for 3 minutes, but in this instance, let's do 2 so we get to more people.
Yeah.
Let's do 90 seconds so we get to more people. Just as long as you make that clear at the outset. I see we have a lot of people here. I'm going to ask that people keep their comments to this length and reinforce that.
Yeah. So,
all right.
has anyone been taking notes? That's why you're our clerk.
Kate at home. Hi, Kate.
Right.
Yeah, we'll have
Yeah,
a revised.
well,
Could I just suggest that maybe that it get revised based on the feedback and take it up next time?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
the point.
Oh, okay.
And send it out as soon as possible. And people should respond with any further comments they have, so that we can
get it.
have something that we can vote on at our next meeting. Yes.
I do want to adjust John's complaint, and it's up to a point, it's a valid complaint, and I know I'm guilty sometimes of speaking up with a one-liner, and I apologize to you because I've done that a couple of times to you in particular. No, I'm serious, but there's also an element of, in the discussion we were having here, I know you had your hand raised, but Paul and I were having a conversation back and forth that was, it was I use the ping pong analogy, but it was a discussion back and forth that I thought was useful to have, and there has to be room for that kind of that discussion as well. And I think, Bernard, honestly, I think you do a very good job of deciding when to say, wait a minute, and when not to, which I appreciate. And so I hope you can, think about that as a situation where.
Don?
Yeah, I do think about it, and it is, it's kind of hard to hit just the right balance.
Yeah.
But, I think there's a difference between, there was a moment of fruitful conversation back and forth that was spontaneous, and, we're having such a great conversation, we'll just keep going and ignore the person who's had his hand up for 5 minutes, and in other words, it should always be in the chair's control.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that means rather than waiting for the chair to finally say, all right, enough of that. Now there's been someone waiting to speak, to sort of realize we've kind of been going back and forth and maybe there's somebody else who wants to speak,
And I also have to get my peripheral vision
I was gonna say
tuned up, right? Because sometimes you hold your hand up, not very high, so I don't notice it. You have to throw it up there. Miriam does that
You
also.
need to ring a little bell.
I'm little, no,
Well, sometimes, but yeah, bell, that's a good idea. Maybe we need bells.
A placard.
Signs to light up.
Okay.
Right.
John.
I just want to add a thought there because actually one of the nicer things that I've seen happen, and I would encourage it, is that sometimes Bernard is looking this way or he's looking this way, and there's somebody in the opposite side of the table trying to be recognized. And every now and then somebody will say, Mike's trying to be recognized, or, Mike will say, Paul's trying to be recognized. We can help with that peripheral vision thing, by sort of also helping the chair realize there's someone waiting to.
That's a very good point, because it's very important that people do that. There's another item on this, or in the packet. I believe it's in the packet, it's in my notes. And that is attendance at meetings of the advisory committee, school committee, and other committees or other boards. And we have, okay, maybe I just came up with this. Many times, there will be a quorum at the advisory committee
Of us.
Yeah. And not frequently, but occasionally, all three of us there will say something. I mean, it's happened, not frequently, but occasionally. I think we need to be sensitive to that, and maybe take care not to always intervene into those other meetings with our thoughts, unless we've in advance agreed that we have some important information to give them, and that there's one person who will do that. I'm not sure how that could be structured, but I just want to make sure that we are aware of the fact that has happened in the past, and we have to keep it under control. While at the same time, when we have something to contribute, we have a system whereby we can make that contribution. Paul?
So this is that you raised the point I wanted to raise. So I bumped into this a few times now at joining the select board, and an issue that I'm concerned about or passionate about, wanting to speak, typically at advisory. That's where I've kind of bumped into it, and not two things. One, not being cognizant that there is a quorum. Harry Friedman's very good actually about announcing to the advisory committee that there's now a quorum of select board members present, but that hasn't always been the case. And so you can inadvertently trip over that. But two, when, if one of us does want to speak on a subject, we really can't share that with the rest of the board outside of a publicly noticed meeting, because we would be violating the open meeting law. So I don't know if there's a clearinghouse, some way to do that, but
either Chaz or Devin should be the person that you tell that you're going to be there, and I'm not sure what.
But then what?
Next.
It's to have a centralized clearinghouse for the attendance of select board members for the committee. It's a strange situation.
There's no, if I say to you, Paul, I'm going to go to the advisory committee meeting to hear about this or talk about this, that's not a violation of the open meeting law. We haven't.
Well, except if and maybe town council can answer this. If there are three of us there and one is speaking,
then it is.
That's a different issue. Yeah. But in terms of coordinating, we can work out amongst ourselves. We don't need an intermediary. It'd be a lot easier if we just work it out amongst ourselves as to who, if anybody, is going to speak. I tend to go to those meetings and try very hard not to speak. But sometimes it's, it seems appropriate. I went to the Harvard Street, the Dick Makers committee, and spoke very deliberately. I really wanted to say something there. So
but
I mean,
there was not a quorum.
But there was no quorum, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, but-
it's all, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say that there's some meetings like the advisory committee during, when they're taking up important issues, we should be there.
Yeah.
But if we say something, then that becomes a deliberation. I mean, it's sort of a screwy situation that impedes our ability to function at a high level. I'm sorry, Chas.
I was thinking through how to address this in a way that doesn't violate the open meeting law to even discuss what it is that you want to bring up and discuss. One way you might do this is have a central, all of you have brooklinema.gov email addresses. We could set up a centralized calendar for you. And you could send calendar invites on your brooklinema.gov email address to each other, to that centralized calendar. And it's an easy place for you to look to see, okay, at this advisory committee meeting, it looks like Mike sent an invite, Paul sent an invite. There are two people. So if I go, there's a quorum. If I really want to say something, I might want to reach out to one of them and say, hey, listen, I really want to say something at this meeting. Do you want to say something too? Can we work something out here? So that you're not having a debate over what it is that you want to be talking about, but that you're just saying.
Just attendance.
Right, for attendance purposes. And that way you have one centralized calendar that indicates whether or not the quorum is present. And you can address those issues accordingly.
Yeah, I like that.
Or maybe, another alternative is that we speak by email, as opposed to appearing and speaking in person. I mean, I think it's very important for us to attend advisory, especially, and maybe even school committee, in some, sometimes. And maybe the rule ought to be, we don't speak under any circumstances. We have something to say, we email them.
It's also hard for you to know, for you all to know in those meetings that if you join and you're not panelists, who's even in the room.
Advisory is open meeting.
Right now.
Yeah.
In some, not all of them are.
Yeah.
So it's just important if you can't see the other attendees, because it's set up in seminar fashion. It may be helpful just to have that single source so that there's clarity and you all know. And it's also information for all of you individually. You can say, you demonstrate to your colleagues like, hey, I really have an interest in this. I'm going to these meetings, and people can, reach out to you one-on-one and say, what are you interested in?
So what I'm suggesting is a little different, I think. And that is that we all feel free to go to all the meetings we should. Or that we want, but we don't, as a policy matter, say anything at meetings. If we have something to say, that we communicate by email, or not communicate at all if you don't.
Yeah, I mean,
communicate.
Yeah, I mean, there are times when you're listening to the discussion there was one discussion I heard at advisory that if I'd had any hair, I would have pulled it out, and it was just. Somebody said something that was just preposterous. And it was an advisory committee meeting, just, okay, it's not my role to speak of these things. But there are times when you hear something that you can actually contribute usefully to the debate or bring some information or something of that sort that you want to speak and you don't know in advance. And so when an email doesn't do any good.
Yeah. But maybe that's just one of the restrictions of being on the select board, I think, John.
I was at the same advisory committee meeting, and I think I know who you're talking.
Yeah, I bet you do.
But that wasn't why I raised my hand. No, I raised my hand to say, I've had the experience of being at a meeting, and they'll all of a sudden I'll hear them say, oh, so, John Bisberg is here. Do you want to make him an attendee or whatever the difference is between, panelists as opposed to an attendee? And I do think the safest thing to do is in all of those circumstances to say, no, I don't want to be a panelist. I'm very happy being just an attendee. Leave me alone. Don't bring me into the room, please. And I've had that happen on a couple of occasions where literally they would bring me into the room and then I'd say, I don't want to be here. Please put me back.
Yeah, I had that.
Among the attendees.
Marion.
Thank you. My inclination is that we just don't speak at these meetings.
Yeah,
I just think it's the safest way. And for someone like me, I can't go to the AC meetings on top of everything else. So I just feel like also there are things then that might be said that if I were there, I'd want to, I just feel like it puts it might put another select board member in a position if either they don't agree or they feel like they heard the discussion differently at the select board. In general, that's my policy on the TMM listserv. I never, even when people call me out by name, which they like to do, I do not respond on the listserv, right? If I need to, I will email them separately one-on-one. And I think that's a good policy we can do. If we have something to say, we can respond to that person individually on our behalf, and then then we're not accidentally speaking on behalf of the select board. We're not violating OML. That's my preference.
Okay. And what I'm suggesting is that if we have something to say, for example, to the advisory committee, that we individually email the advisory committee,
Yes, I-
excluding the select
Yeah.
board members, so there's no issue.
Yep.
No issue.
Right.
And then you're
Paul,
speaking on behalf of
I
yourself.
think.
See,
I think
that's
John
not,
just
that's not a hand
kinda
raise, that's a
said-
thinking.
See, you confuse me all the time. You do things like that.
I lost my thought. No, so sometimes at and this is really advisory, especially in the heat of the warrant reviews. And there's things going back between advisory and the select board. They don't always have the most update information when they're taking a vote or they're debating. And so it is, and vice versa, by the way, right? Sometimes we don't have the most update. So it is helpful to have someone from the select board present to clarify information that they may be sharing or misunderstanding or misconstruing. So maybe, when we're going through the warrant, maybe there's an individual, each select board member is assigned or volunteers to be the point person for an article. So when it is at advisory, that select board member could go and speak to the issues and, and represent the position or the opinion of the board.
Of course, Melissa's always there.
Not
And
always.
she knows more than we do.
That's so true.
That's true.
Yeah,
100%.
certainly on a lot of the procedural stuff, but
Right.
sometimes on the substantive, the will of the board and so forth, it's more appropriate to have a select board member express that.
Okay, so we should identify someone to represent us.
So in the spirit of speaking less, I wonder if we can conclude, because I think we've probably beaten this one.
Okay, I have one other item on my list. And this is just my list. I apparently didn't send it out to anyone. But actually, you mentioned that we should also include, if a select board member asks to have an item on the agenda.
Yes,
The
please.
default should be to include it. And I agree with that.
Yeah.
And that's why we talked about Miriam paid family leave issue.
Thank you. Yes, that's right.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
So I don't think there's any dispute about that. So. Okay,
All right.
good. So
you very much.
someone has been taking notes and will summarize all this for us for our next meeting. Okay.
We do have the one more item.
Yeah, we have two more items. Licensing, hearing policy, and
Gosh.
meeting schedule. Okay, so next, discussion and possible vote on policy for delegation of public hearings for licenses that must be issued by the select board.
Yes.
And Chaz, you're gonna tell us about the solution you've come up with to reduce the amount of common victular hearings that we do.
5 minutes or less, right?
Yes, or no, I just.
Well, you have the memo.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good.
Right, so
Okay,
I've been working on this in conjunction with staff for some time now, and I'm very grateful to all the staff for their efforts on this. Long and the short of it is, right now, under the Town Administrator Enabling Act, you're allowed to delegate a lot of your hearing stuff, except for inn holders, lodging houses, common victulars, food vendors, secondhand motor vehicles, open air parking, liquor sales, or theater and entertainment licenses. Those are all things that the Enabling Act, which is effect for all intents and purposes Brookline's charter, doesn't allow you to delegate. Town Council's office, and Jonathan Simpson in particular, thank you, Jonathan, went through the requirements for a lot of these licenses. And our general consensus is there has to be a hearing. A hearing must be held. But you, the select board, do not need to hold this hearing. It can be held by staff. You just need to still be the final decision maker, which means you need to make an informed decision on the license. I want to, and so as a result of that, we came up with this idea that staff would have these hearings during the workday, that a member of the select board or one of your designees would be at that meeting as part of a panel that would include me or someone on my designee, so a licensing specialist from the select board office or their designee, and an attorney from the office of town council. We would hold the traditional hearings. We would have public comment. We'd open the public hearing. We close the public hearing. And then that panel would say, we'd ask questions to the potential license holder or change in license holder. And then we would decide whether or not to recommend approval of it. If there were, for this pilot, anyone coming in opposition to this, or if there was not unanimity among that group, what we would do is that would then go to you on your agenda as nothing would change. It would still be a regular agenda item for you to consider.
Not a hearing.
Not necessarily a hearing, unless the recommendation of the panel was to have a hearing. And then if there's unanimity and there's no public comment in opposition to the application, then the item would be placed on your miscellaneous agenda. So with that said, you would still, because this meeting would be, there would be minutes involved, there would be a recommendation in your packet. And that would go out on Friday, which is, giving you the weekend to discuss it. It wouldn't be one of those late breaking packet items. You'd have the opportunity to review that. You could review the tape and then you would be able to make an informed decision at the select board meeting as to whether to approve that as part of the miscellaneous agenda. I do want to let town council weigh in on this if he's willing to on the. Not yet.
It seems straightforward to me. I mean, it's a great proposal. Mike?
Yeah, I think, the sort of the poster child for something that would come before us was the the innkeepers on Webster Street. And that and the controversy over how Pine Street Inn was handling things. Those are two examples that I think, belong here. And I trust that this, you'd be sensitive to those. And if we have even a quarter of a brain and are reading our materials, we should be sensitive to them as well. So I think it's a great way to do it.
So I wanted to practically speak about how this would work. So let's take the example of, I think it was the former Holiday Inn. That gentleman came and he had concerns about delivery times, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
So that scenario would go before this committee. You'd hold a public hearing. That gentleman's going to show up. He's going to speak his mind, and you would consider and possibly make a licensing condition, right? You would potentially, you could recommend and actually vote for, recommend a licensing change to say you can only do deliveries during a certain time. That would then come to us, and we wouldn't be holding a public hearing. We may discuss and approve it, or we could also make a change, but that would be the scenario.
That's one possible scenario.
So when would it come to us and we'd need to have a public hearing?
So I think that would be a situation where, for example, someone came in and said, I just heard about this. There wasn't enough time. There are 5 people that want to be heard at the select board. I feel like this is a really, important issue. And if the consensus of the group was in that moment, okay, we really need more public comment and more back and forth on this. If it's, for example, if it's one person and the issue is fairly clear, we could say, all right, we don't need another public hearing on this. We just need the board to decide what kind of mitigation they want on this front, if any. If it is an issue that just requires continued dialogue with the public and input from the public, I think that's a scenario similar to what Mike was talking about. It's about some of those bigger ticket items where I think the panel can make an informed kind of, decision to say, recommend to the select board, you really should we should continue this hearing to the select board meeting on Tuesday.
Yeah. Okay, good. And I think it's a great idea. It not only helps us in terms of reducing the number of common vic licenses we have to do, it also helps staff in that it takes some of the burden off of their participation at our meetings. I think that, all around good idea. Yeah.
I think it actually helps the applicant as well, because they have an attorney that they have to engage. They have to, they come to a meeting during business hours. It's a lot easier. And
they're likely to get their hearing when scheduled,
Yeah,
as opposed to 2 hours later.
that's right.
or 2 hours
Yeah.
after.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so this is a win-win.
Great.
for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I love it.
With your authorization tonight, we'll move forward on implementing this. We will report back to you at the end of the summer.
Yeah.
Because we do want to track not only, how much time does it save you, but what's the difference and what's the delta in staff time? Is this, it is my hope that this will be more of a streamlined experience, less overall burden on staff. But we'll see. We'll track that and we'll give you the
Right.
metrics.
Do we need a vote?
Yes.
Okay. So what is it called? Proposed plan?
Licensing delegation pilot plan.
Okay, I move approval of the licensing delegation, what plan?
Pilot.
Pilot plan. All in favor, John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Good.
Thank you.
So finally, last
The only
item on the agenda. I'm sure Miriam has already reviewed this and has no issues. Select board meeting schedule.
The only item that I want to bring to your attention on this proposed plan, which I did not receive feedback on from select board members, is in the past, not in 4 years, but there was a practice of this board to meet once in the month of August. You have before you a meeting for either August 15th or August 22nd. So this board just needs to decide everyone was fine with all of the rest of the dates. So this board just needs to decide if you do want to revive that practice or if you'd like 2 meetings in the month of August, in which case I would, space them out in the every other fashion that we have for the other months. Or you could choose 1 meeting in the month of August and it could be the 15th or the 22nd.
I think John first.
I just want to vote for the 15th
And 1, presumably.
and 1.
Yeah,
Okay.
me too.
My-
15th and 1.
Okay, so I agree. So that's 3 votes. And probably more if we want to look for them.
I will be remote
Okay, well, yeah, we all can be.
probably in a kayak.
Yeah,
I will be remote,
on the beach.
possibly in a kayak.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Deal.
the end of the meeting. We can go home now.
Did we vote
So I can delete.
Oh,
all
do we need?
22nd.
or do
did
you
we-
want to vote?
Well, no, do we need to vote on the
You
schedule?
don't need to vote.
No.
You don't have to vote.
Okay.
We publish it so that the public is aware and we'll also, post that on the calendar so folks know that you're entering a reduced meeting schedule.
So I'm deleting August 22nd.
Get it out of there.
Okay.
This is my calendar is my life.
Famous last words.
Yeah.
You can always come back.
All right. And so look for my invitation for either the 10th or the 12th of July and check with your significant other if you have one. If not, then you're invited to bring somebody off the street.
I'm gonna take you up on that.
Yeah, I may take you up on that too. Okay, what was I gonna say? One other thing.
You meant to say adjourn?
Oh, no. The first meeting that we are missing under this new schedule is next week's meeting.
Yeah.
So
Which
do
is
not,
Eighth grade graduation.
okay, so do not appear here at town hall
I will be
for
busy.
that.
No problem.
Oh,
Okay, thanks.
And also